Chapter 26:39. The man in the darkness moved his fingertips slightly downward. The girl made a soft murmur, as if she was a little uncomfortable. His fingertips stopped and didn't move again. He wasn't afraid that she would wake up, but just politely suppressed his impulsive touch. In the middle of the summer night, there was an ambiguous and hot aura rising. It made the man's breathing a little heavier. In the end, his hand just stopped on her collar. He felt the smooth touch of his collection, and the beautiful luster of the silk fabric under the faint halo shining under his fingertips. Yu Xiaoyun didn't know how long he stood there. His silent face was as frozen and expressionless as a white jade sculpture. He seemed to be testing her, moving down her back and finally touching her waist. She didn't wake up. After all, he had been on tenterhooks the entire day, staying in this corner. Once no one saw her at night, she could really rest. So she was so tired that it was not easy to wake up. She was stupid, but she could read people's expressions. She had some IQ, but it was like the intuition of a small animal, without the intelligence of a human. Yu Xiaoyun picked her up and slowly walked behind the screen. On the low bed. He put her on one side of the bed, and then he lay on the other side of the bed. The middle was especially far away. He even gave her a new quilt. Then he closed his eyes and prepared to sleep. This time, he didn't have nightmares. Perhaps he subconsciously felt that there was someone beside him, so he didn't expose his weakness of being tortured by nightmares. When Yu Xiaoyun woke up, he saw a petite figure in his arms. He woke up and stared at the top of her head for a long time. Then he pushed her away and got up to leave. After all, men always had some awkward physiological reactions in the morning, even if most men had them. But young master, you couldn't bear to see his beastly side being seen. When he washed up, he stared at himself in the mirror. He didn't have the fierce gloominess after waking up. Instead, he was as elegant as ever. It was because there were no nightmares. So he forgave Wei Bai for snuggling into his arms in the middle of the night. After washing his face, Yu Xiaoyun stared at his towel for a long time before he realized something. Then his face darkened. He opened the door and went out, only to see a small figure curled up in the bedding. He walked over and lifted the blanket. Wei Bai had just woken up when she saw Yu Xiaoyun's stormy face. What the hell? Did he find out that she had whipped him in his dream? In the end, Yu Xiaoyun took a few deep breaths before he finally asked word by word, "Have you brushed your teeth?" Wei Bai. The system that had just woken up was speechless. Wei Bai's sluggishness caused Yu Xiaoyun to misunderstand. He had always been a clean freak. Seeing her acquiescence, his heart trembled. She had been here for so long, but she hadn't brushed her teeth. Wei Bai saw that he had misunderstood, but she couldn't say that she had swiped it while she was in the toilet. After all, Yu Xiaoyun had more than one toothbrush in the bathroom. The maid kept a few new toothbrushes and an electric toothbrush every day. In the end, Yu Xiaoyun was a traditional old man. He followed the rules and used his own wooden toothbrush. She used an electric toothbrush. After using it, she would put it back where it was and replace it with a new one the next day. Then, when Yu Xiaoyun entered the bathroom and didn't see her toiletries, he thought that she hadn't brushed her teeth. Wei Bai was about to explain. She had to maintain her persona and think of a way to make her words sound retarded. Chapter 26:40. This delay. Yu Xiaoyun had already carried her to the sink with a long face. Then he gave her a new wooden toothbrush and got the toothpaste ready. Then he said coldly, "Open your mouth." Wei Bai. Did he really think that her brain was plankton? No matter how well she acted as a retard, she wasn't that retarded. The girl looked up hesitantly and then looked at the toothbrush in his hand. She seemed to realize what he was going to do. A strange expression appeared on her face. Her misty eyes turned slightly. The girl, who should have been dull, now had a sense of quickness. She took a few steps forward, reached out her slender hand, and took the toothbrush in his hand. Then she turned around and took the spare bamboo-style mouthwash cup. This was all new. It was changed every day. The maid probably thought that Yu Xiaoyun was unusually clean. She couldn't wait to change the things he used every day. She turned her back to him, lowered her head, and began to brush her teeth expressionlessly. Her movements weren't big, but she was very familiar with it. She didn't look at the man behind her and his indescribable expression. Wei Bai finished brushing her teeth. A towel had already appeared on her face. Yu Xiaoyun was standing behind her, his expression indifferent and calm. But the towel in his hand wanted to suffocate her. Her face was red from being wiped by him. Yu Xiaoyun seemed to feel that she was clean and let her go. Taking care of a retard was also a very challenging task for young Master Yu. Yu Xiaoyun put on his home clothes. He opened the wardrobe and saw the clothes that the maid had put in early in the morning. They were home clothes that were one size smaller. They were also silk, the fabric of his clothes that he was used to and liked. Last night, the bathroom was in a mess. In addition, he opened the collection and took out the cheongsam. It had already spread everywhere. Those who originally had doubts about the relationship between Wei Wei Bai and Yu Xiaoyun, they immediately changed their minds and completely believed that young Master Yu was finally moved. The maids and the people below immediately prepared all the women's clothes and sent them over. Even if Yu Xiaoyun didn't give any instructions. When Yu Xiaoyun saw it this morning, he didn't say anything. He had forgotten to let her change out of her cheongsam last night. Even a shirt would have been fine. When she woke up the next day, she couldn't even look at the cheongsam anymore. Yu Xiaoyun walked to the dining table. Wei Wei Bai followed behind him carefully, just like his little tail. He didn't stop her either, as if he had tacitly agreed to her following him. All traces of the Bai family had been cleaned up. Even the lotus flowers outside the garden were being tidied by the gardeners. He was worried that the bridge would be submerged and he wouldn't be able to see the road outside. After changing the Bai family's front door, they engraved the Yu family's doorplate. This place was not called the Bai family. It was Yu Xiaoyun's Yu family. As for whether or not Love Garden needed to be renamed, Yu Xiaoyun didn't have time to worry about such a trivial matter. After the meal, he still had a big meeting to attend. It was the subordinates who followed him that needed to be redistributed. The dark business had to be abandoned. Therefore, some people would definitely not be able to eat well. To not disappoint this group of people, he also needed to take out a sufficient amount of compensation. If it wasn't for the sake of toppling the Bai family, he actually didn't want to lay out such a big path. He was too tired. Yu Xiaoyun didn't make a sound when he was eating. Wei Wei Bai didn't either. The two of them were quiet. One was elegant and indifferent, while the other was cautious. After the meal, he changed into a suit and got up to walk out. Fast to read the full article at https://www.sashu.com. Fast to read the at https://m.sashu.com/fast, Chapter 2641. Wei Wei Bai immediately got up and followed him. Yu Xiaoyun ignored her and walked straight out of the room. He came to the corridor and walked towards the path. Wei Wei Bai hesitated when she stepped out of the room. But she still followed him. But when he walked on the path and was about to leave this place, a trace of panic appeared in her eyes. She walked slowly outside the corridor, but she didn't dare to follow him. That was the outside world. So she didn't dare to go. When Yu Xiaoyun was halfway there, he seemed to have thought of something and quietly turned back. The man's eyes were still affectionate, but there was no softness in them. He saw her clutching her home clothes with both hands. She seemed to be very frightened and looked at him pitifully. She was almost like an abandoned kitten. Yu Xiaoyun looked at her indifferently for a while. Then, he moved his tender and cold eyes away. Then, the man strode forward with his slender legs and continued to walk forward. Wei Wei Bai's face turned even paler. She tried to step out of the corridor. At first, her footsteps were hesitant. Gradually, she sped up and finally ran wildly. She saw him disappear at the end of the path. The girl's face was full of panic and fear. It was as if she had stepped into a strange world for the first time, and the only person she was familiar with was gone. She plunged under the lotus leaves and ran desperately out of the path. But she bumped into a warm embrace. The warm embrace had the faint, fresh scent of a man and a dry fragrance. She looked up in a daze and saw Yu Xiaoyun standing at the end of the path. He seemed to be waiting for something. He held a freshly lit cigarette in his hand. The hazy smoke blurred the false affection in his eyes. Instead, there was a hint of ghostly gloom. His eyes turned down and his tone was calm. "You'll suffer in the future if you act rashly." After saying that, he pushed her away and turned to walk forward. Wei Wei Bai didn't hesitate and continued to follow him. The place where the meeting was held was another secret place. It was the safest restaurant in the city. They had booked a private room in advance. The private room was very big. There were dozens of men, all of them calm and indifferent. When Yu Xiaoyun walked in, everyone stood up and bowed. These dozens of people were the backbone members under Yu Xiaoyun. Every single one of them had been through a reign of terror, bringing with them a baleful aura. Yu Xiaoyun calmly raised his hand, indicating for everyone to sit down. Then he took a few steps forward, and everyone saw a small figure with a lowered head, long hair that reached her knees, and wearing casual clothes made of silk, walked in carefully while tugging on the corner of Yu Xiaoyun's suit. It was like a young sheep appearing in a pack of wolves. He was too immature. Instead, it made everyone unable to come back to their senses for a while. Such a big meeting, such a murderous scene to divide the spoils. Among so many terrifying men, a girl who looked like an underage girl appeared. It was too strange. Yu Xiaoyun sat in the main seat and held her arm. The man who had not touched her all this time pulled her into his arms. Wei Wei Bai sat on his lap. She was a little slow and felt that this position was too intimate. Just as she was about to resist, the man casually reached out and grabbed her waist. Then he whispered in her ear, "Don't move." These words were cold and indifferent. There was no trace of affection in them. Wei Wei Bai was stunned and did not move. All the puzzled men at the scene understood the moment she sat on Yu Xiaoyun's lap, so they did not protest. Fast to read // fast to txt download fast to read on your phone. https://m sashu.com/fast. Chapter 2642. After all, everyone tacitly agreed that Yu Xiaoyun's woman could participate in the meeting, which was also a form of respect for their boss. For the rest of the time, Yu Xiaoyun dealt with a lot of heavy matters with little effort. On the most difficult distribution of benefits, his way of dealing with it also satisfied many of his brothers. Yu Xiaoyun did not hesitate to use his own benefits to fill in the holes of some of his subordinates who had lost too many. Because the meeting was long, Wei Wei Bai was so tired that she couldn't hold on anymore. She leaned on his chest and narrowed her eyes in a daze, like a cat taking a nap. If the rest of the people were curious about what Yu Xiaoyun's woman looked like at the beginning, after a long time, they didn't care anymore. After all, this kind of girl didn't look threatening at all. She was probably the kind of pet. No one took Wei Wei Bai seriously. Before the end of the meeting, Yu Xiaoyun realized that his hands were sweaty. All kinds of benefits were distributed, and it was an extremely difficult task to redivide the forces with the various subordinates. Although Yu Xiaoyun was sorting out this hell-level mission bit by bit, his body couldn't hold on any longer. It was more of a mental exhaustion. He was still expressionless and didn't show any emotions. But the eyelashes of the girl in his arms moved. She seemed to have noticed something and raised her clear but dull eyes to look at him blankly for a while. Then she carefully reached out and placed her hand on his arm, gently stroking his arm. It seemed to be comforting his irritated and tired mind. Yu Xiaoyun's eyes moved, but he didn't lower his head to look at Wei Wei Bai. Just like that, her gentle touch didn't attract anyone's attention. Yu Xiaoyun's expression was still indifferent and gentle, but that impatience gradually settled in his eyes. Instead, it made his eyes even more gentle and beautiful. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 20. After the meeting, everyone left one by one. Yu Xiaoyun watched everyone leave. He faintly lowered his eyes and saw Bai Weiwei nestled in his arms, nodding her head. She seemed to be too bored and sleepy, but her hand was still touching his arm. Yu Xiaoyun's expression softened. He reached out and held her fingers, pinching her weak fingertips in his hand. Then he ordered, "Get someone to serve the dishes." During the meeting, no outsiders were allowed to enter. Therefore, she had no food to eat, not even a sip of water. Other than being safe and secretive, the best thing about this restaurant was that it was famous for its dishes. When Wei Wei Bai heard that there was food to eat, she was no longer sleepy. Her eyes lit up and she immediately sat up. Yu Xiaoyun also put her on the chair. As if he was looking at his favorite cat, he reached out and gently stroked her hair. "Wait a little longer." Wei Wei Bai glanced at him uneasily. Yu Xiaoyun was like a roundworm in her stomach. He called the waitress here. "Follow her, she'll take you to the bathroom." After all, such a long meeting was indeed inhumane. Wei Wei Bai didn't hold back either. She really couldn't hold it in. That long and smelly meeting made her feel suffocated. Yu Xiaoyun was too gentle. He couldn't wait to take care of everything. If it were up to her, these little bastards would all be brought up to beat the other side, and they would even give them benefits to make them satisfied. Was Yu Xiaoyun the boss? Why did he look more like a sucker? As she complained, she went to the bathroom. When she washed her hands, she couldn't help but show off to the system. If it were up to me, I would be better than Yu Xiaoyun as the boss. But she was a retard in this world. Side mission. That's right, you would definitely be better than that stupid monk as the boss. Wei Wei Bai touched her chin proudly. No matter what, I'm still managing a big company. I've also experienced so many worlds and seen so many big scenes. If it's a career, you might not be able to beat me. Mission. That's right, that's right. My Wei Wei is amazing. What's the point of having a man? Being the king of your career is your crown. Wei Wei Bai. Although the praise sounded very good, was it an illusion? When did the system become so good? Wasn't her system the kind of young man who had a mocking face and spouted venom? That green tea bitch tone. That familiar voice. Transmigration system, Adonis, come here. Crossover system, Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.com. Download, read the full text. 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 Chapter 2643. Side mission. That's right, that's right. You're the best, la 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 Wei Wei Bai. Enough, stop praising me. You're killing me. The system had just returned from stewing pork ribs for itself when it saw the side mission occupying its spot. It was chatting with the host. His life was already so difficult. His sense of existence was already so faint. Why did the side mission want to snatch such a faint sense of existence? It could only be the system who could chat with the host. The system burst into tears and took out a large fly swatter. It carefully approached the side mission, intending to swat it to death and be done with it. The side mission danced proudly. Come on, let's have some fun. We have to be ambitious. What's the big deal about being retarded? We've already played with the little white flower. Look at other hosts, they can fly around and destroy the harem on Earth with 300,000 savings. Look at you, you're such a good-for-nothing. Don't you feel embarrassed to eat the little white flower joke every day? Wei Wei Bai. No, the little white flower is my king. It's my favorite. Side mission. Disfigurement. Wei Wei Bai. That's right. My career is my dream. I'll immediately climb to the top of my career for you to see. System. Host, you should have some integrity. It's just a face. Side mission. Side mission activated. Host, please go out and make a call to tell the other party where you and the male lead are. Wei Wei Bai. That's it. Side mission. It's just a small mission. Wei Wei Bai. What's next? Side mission. I haven't thought about it yet. You finish it first. Wei Wei Bai. So why are you so happy to agree with those idiotic remarks of the king of his career? Are you fucking kidding me? Did you come out early just to make me feel uncomfortable? UB*TCH. Side mission. If you fail the mission, you'll be disfigured. Your soul will be disfigured. Your soul will be disfigured together with the system. Do you have to say something important 3 times? Wei Wei Bai shouted hoarsely. Can't you be a little more creative? This punishment was used on the previous plane. Side quest. It's so useful. I want to use it a few times in every dimension in the future. In Wei Wei Bai's mind, a terrifying and hateful old monster with a ferocious face and a bloody mouth suddenly appeared. It slowly grew its fangs and laughed. Disfigure, disfigure, use it a few more times, use it a few more times. Wei Wei Bai. Nightmare. He wanted to die. Don't stop me. She was going to beat that little bitch to death. Wei Wei Bai asked the system helplessly, can we kill it? The system could not get a side quest, so it put away the fly swatter helplessly. Not now. Its value has increased again recently. I need 5 million HP to kill it. Do your best for the mission. Wei bye. What's wrong with smashing you? When did you become so gentle, humble, and adorable? The system said, I'll be disfigured if I don't complete the mission. Although it was just a face, it was still very important to think about. If the host could see him in the future, he would be in a disfigured state. Based on the host's preference for looks, there was no doubt that she would kick him away with a single kick. Wei bye. You were so generous when I was disfigured. Now that it's our turn to be disfigured together, you're urging me to complete the mission. Suddenly, she wondered why the little bitch in the system did not go on a blind date. They were a match made in heaven. No matter what, face was still important. Wei bye walked out of the bathroom and saw an old-fashioned telephone at the end of the wooden corridor. Although it was old-fashioned, it was just an antique shell. It could still be used. Wei bye walked over expressionlessly and called the number given by the side quest. Crossover system. Adonis, come here. Crossover system. Adonis, come here. / crossover system. Adonis, come here. Download crossover system. Adonis, come here. Mobile reading crossover system. Adonis, come here. Comma. Chapter 26:44. Then she didn't wait for the other party to say anything. She said calmly, Yu Xiaoyun is at the Cloud Restaurant. The Cloud Restaurant was where they were. Wei bye hung up the phone, afraid that someone would see it, so she immediately turned and left. She had some doubts about the purpose of this mission in her heart, so she said, What kind of mission is this? Could it be a side mission? That little bastard's brain can't even think of a simple side mission. Without waiting for the system to speak, the side mission immediately reached out and pressed the system to open its face. This side mission is to let you complete the main storyline of your career. What's the point of relying on men? Rise, woman, your name is the sea and waves. Every wave is the taste of victory. Wei bye. This impassioned tone, why did the side mission also become a spirit? Side mission. My plan this time is to let you take back the power of the Bai family, whip that little man, make him kneel on the keyboard, and serve you water to wash your feet. Wei bye. No, wait! She had racked her brains for the mission to begin with. The following side missions wouldn't force her to complete the damn mission of making Yu Xiaoyun kneel on the keyboard, serve her water, and be whipped, right? Side mission. What are you waiting for? I'm afraid you won't be able to complete it and turn this big mission into a small one. The first mission is to help you deal with the crippled male lead. It's okay, the party you just called is the enemy of the male lead. They have already rushed to deal with the male lead. Wei bye. Fuck you, side mission. I accept your gratitude. When your man is crippled, you can take back the power in his hands. Then I'll go to sleep first. Wei bye, sleep a cat, get up and go out. If you have the guts, let's die together. The system could finally speak. It's okay, you can do it. The host was so miserable that it couldn't bear to scold her. Wei bye staggered and reached out to support herself against the wall, feeling that there were dark waves in front of her eyes. The sharp-tongued system was finally improved. Another vicious little bitch came to smash the side mission. Main system, what grudges do you have with me? Did I whore you in my previous life? When Wei bye returned to the door of the private room, she cautiously poked her head out. However, he saw Yu Xiaoyun leaning against the chair with his hands supporting his chin. He was resting with his eyes closed. The man's skin was fair and delicate. It was the kind of beautiful appearance of someone who lived like a prince. His eyelashes fluttered, and he slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were hazy, and he saw the girl at the door. She looked petite and scared, as if she didn't dare to enter the door. Yu Xiaoyun's mind stirred. He lowered his finger from his chin and then waved his hand. The misty eyes of the girl at the door immediately sparkled, as if she was very happy. Yu Xiaoyun's bad mood also improved a little. Wei bye walked in and sat beside him obediently. Yu Xiaoyun reached out and took the chopsticks. He scalded them with boiling water and then scalded the cup for her. What do you want to eat? I've asked them to serve you some. You can try whatever you like. After you're done eating, you can pack a few servings to go home. She was too harmless and cute. Although he was easily bullied, Yu Xiaoyun could suppress the urge to bully her. After all, compared to bullying her, holding her in his hands, controlling her happiness and sadness, and making her look at him with admiration, wouldn't it be more fulfilling? His feelings for her were nothing more than a pet's fondness for her. Yu Xiaoyun thought coldly, but his actions were unusually gentle. When he saw Wei Wei Bai's gaze fall on the hairy crab, he smiled. You can't eat this thing, and it's not delicious. Chapter 26:45. Now was not the best time for hairy crabs. Although he said so, he personally took the tools to open the crab, cut off the crab legs, and opened the crab shell. Then, he picked out the crab roe for her to eat. The bodyguards standing at the door looked at each other. They felt that it was inconceivable that their young master would peel the crab shell for a girl. Although it was inconceivable. But everyone vaguely understood that the little retard of the Bai family who was bullied in the past. This was considered climbing up the social ladder. Even if they wanted to bully her, they would only be bullied by one person. And they didn't have that right. Yu Xiaoyun didn't eat much and watched Wei Wei Bai eat. When she ate, she took small bites. It didn't look like much, but she ate quickly. Moreover, she wasn't reserved. She ate as much as she wanted. She didn't have the concept of a lady dieting at all. After eating, her fingertips were a little oily. She seemed to look at them with some discomfort. Yu Xiaoyun stared at her fingers for half a second before picking up a tissue as if nothing had happened. He held her hand gently and wiped her fingers clean one by one. The girl's fingers were extremely long. They were as delicate as snow, but they were soft and warm. There was a faint powder on her fingertips. It was like cherry blossoms falling. The strength of the man rubbing his fingers increased by a few degrees. Wei Wei Bai seemed to be a little confused and looked up at him, but she didn't dare to protest. Yu Xiaoyun also knew that she wouldn't protest. He didn't even understand what the burning passion in his eyes meant at this moment. He had been pure and abstinent for so many years. He didn't intend to break this pattern. Even if he felt a little different from the usual heat towards her. He also tried his best to suppress it. Of course, if he didn't want to suppress it one day, she couldn't resist. Yu Xiaoyun thought indifferently. He had never taken her emotions and thoughts to heart. If it was really for her own good, he should hire a psychiatrist. But so what? Was she good or not? It had nothing to do with him, right? Yu Xiaoyun thought of his nightmare. When she was in his arms, he felt at ease. This was a very good pillow. So it was fine to keep her. Yu Xiaoyun asked someone to pack a few more hairy crabs and pumpkin pastries. This was all because Wei Wei Bai ate a lot of food. Then they got into the car and prepared to go back. The car successfully exited the restaurant on the cloud and drove to the small road. Today's meeting was kept a secret, and no one would notice that there was a meeting at this time. Therefore, the various forces had yet to react. However, he had already appeased all his subordinates and distributed all the benefits. Then, the rest of the matter should start to go smoothly. Of course, the so-called smooth sailing was still just a matter of mental and physical labor. Yu Xiaoyun held the girl's finger and played with it unhurriedly. A young girl as delicate as a flower. Other than this age, there was no one else. That was why so many old men liked girls who were much younger than them. Because the flesh was fresh and tender enough. This was a kind of fresh beauty that older beauties could not provide. Wei Wei Bai was still sitting there in a daze. She didn't move or resist. She just lowered her head, and her eyelashes covered her big hazy eyes. It was as if she was thinking about nothing. Yu Xiaoyun didn't pay attention to her. His gaze fell lightly to the front. However, he realized that there were a few cars in front of him, and they seemed to have formed an encirclement. Yu Xiaoyun, who was used to living in a scheming and dark world, immediately became vigilant. He was about to instruct the driver to avoid them. But it was too late. The cars in front were lined up one after another. Chapter 26:46. Then, he drove straight over and hit Yu Xiaoyun's car. To keep it a secret, Yu Xiaoyun's car left the motorcade midway and entered the small road. Almost no one knew about his route. This small road was also a last-minute decision. In the end, his enemy was still guarding the road that he had to pass through. He was in danger now because he didn't have a bodyguard. Yu Xiaoyun calmly took out his phone. He had just contacted his people, but before he could say anything, the sound of the violent collision made his mind buzz. Everything that followed became violent and messy. The other party was clearly a suicide attack and didn't give him any chance to escape. A few cars came over and hit his car one after another. His driver was also an expert and immediately began to shake them off. On the other side of the small road was a thin railing. Below was a slope and some steep cliffs. If the car was thrown down, it would be crippled even if it didn't die. In the end, the few cars fell down the slope in the chaos. And one of Yu Xiaoyun's car tires had already burst. The remaining car rammed into him recklessly. The two cars made a tragic roar. Yu Xiaoyun's mind went black, and a pair of soft hands had already hugged his head. The car overturned. Gasoline was poured everywhere, and there was a strong smell of smoke. Yu Xiaoyun regained some consciousness. His face was fine, but his head was broken. Blood flowed into his eyes, blurring his vision. His legs seemed to be unable to move. This place was very dangerous because no one really died in the car that was forced into it. When they climbed up from the bottom of the slope, that was when he would die. He wanted to move his fingers, but he found that he was almost pressed under the car, and there was no possibility of him moving. In a daze, he heard someone crawling beside him. Yu Xiaoyun's blood-stained eyelashes trembled, and his eyes moved to the side with difficulty. He saw a petite figure crawling out of the car bit by bit. He thought that just now, she seemed to have reached out to protect him. And now, she regretted it. Did she want to run away by herself? Yu Xiaoyun thought indifferently. His mind became more and more confused, and his rationality gradually left him. The anger in his heart couldn't be suppressed. Why was she running away? Was she so afraid of dying with him? Yu Xiaoyun thought that even death was a failure. Even a pet had managed to escape, leaving him here alone to await death. Yu Xiaoyun would not normally show the emotional fluctuations of a weakling. If he wasn't in such a fragile state, he wouldn't be so unreasonable. Yu Xiaoyun slowly closed his eyes as the blood dripped down bit by bit. His fingertips twitched because of the pain. The next moment, a pair of warm and soft hands held his hand. Yu Xiaoyun's blood-stained eyes suddenly opened. He saw that outside the inverted car door, the girl had stretched out her slender arms and was trying to drag him out with all her strength. He moved his lips, but didn't say anything. She used all her strength and almost broke his bones. Finally, she dragged him out of the dangerous car bit by bit. Yu Xiaoyun really wanted to say that it was useless even if he dragged her out. She couldn't escape with him. But when she put him on her shoulder and walked out step by step, Yu Xiaoyun's eyes widened. It was as if he could not believe that she could carry him on her back. Yu Xiaoyun's face was leaning against her shoulder. His fragile, slender, and vulnerable body. But it contained a huge amount of strength. Her tied-up black hair had already spread out. Her hair was messy, as if it was the first time he saw her. She was similar to a stray cat that no one wanted. Even her fur was dirty and messy. But this stray cat risked her life to drag him away from the dangerous place. Even if her walking speed was really too slow. Yu Xiaoyun sighed. His voice was a little hoarse. We can't escape together. You go first. Wei Wei Bai's footsteps did not stop at all. Her breathing was unusually heavy. It was as if she was enduring some intense pain, but she did not make a sound. Yu Xiaoyun pursed his lips, his thick eyelashes pressing down. His eyes were full of blood, and the pain was unbearable. Another wet mist surged into his eyes. He blinked with difficulty, and his consciousness was completely blurred. In the end he sighed. Then he closed his eyes and fainted. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 30. Wei Wei Bai did not hear the favorability prompt. She was also injured. It was all thanks to the pain-relieving effect of the life guarantee to prolong her life. With great difficulty, she stuffed Yu Xiaoyun into the corner of the path and sat down. Just now, she spent 10 life points to buy the map where the enemy was lost. Now she just had to wait for Yu Xiaoyun's subordinates, who would not get lost, to come find them. Wei Wei Bai was as tired as a dog. She said to the system, "Fuck that damn side table." Was this to get rid of Yu Xiaoyun? This was purely tormenting her. Chapter 2647. When Yu Xiaoyun woke up, he saw the decorations of the hospital. His cheek was scratched. Although his leg was pressed down, there was no major problem with it due to timely rescue. As long as he recuperated for a period of time, his wound would not be fatal, and there would not be any irreversible disabilities left. When Chen Shan came with the nurse with the nutritional supplements, he saw Yu Xiaoyun already sitting on the bed. The pale man had gloomy eyes that were as deep as the abyss. His hair was messy, and his body in a hospital gown had a sharp and cold aura. Chen Shan slowed down. Yu Xiaoyun was in a bad mood. But even if he slowed down, Yu Xiaoyun could still hear it. He slowly raised his head. The man's delicate and gentle eyes were slightly raised. The coldness in the depths of his eyes made people unable to help but hold their breath. Chen Shan coughed lightly. It's good that you're fine. We're already investigating the traitor. The results will be out soon. A strange emotion appeared on Yu Xiaoyun's face. It was hesitation. What about her? Chen Shan was at a loss. Yu Xiaoyun did not continue to repeat. Instead, he slowly tidied up his collar. Then, he reached for the crutches beside the bed and got off the bed. Even if his ankle was crushed, although it was not serious, he could not walk freely for a while. Even though he was in such a sorry state, Yu Xiaoyun was still walking forward with an elegant attitude. Chen Shan wanted to rush over to help him. However, Yu Xiaoyun's eyes were cold as he glared at him indifferently. Chen Shan immediately followed behind him obediently. When he came back to his senses, he said, "It's not very good." He broke a rib and almost pierced his internal organs. When our people found you Miss was already vomiting blood. If they had thought that Wei Wei Bai was a pet before. But because her injury was clearly more serious, she was able to drag such a heavy Yu Xiaoyun and walk such a long way to hide. When they found them at that time, those people who wanted Yu Xiaoyun's life were only a few dozen meters away from their hiding place. And Yu Xiaoyun fainted because he hit his head. The traces of the dragging along the way were obvious that Wei Wei Bai had saved Yu Xiaoyun's life. The backbone of their group was Yu Xiaoyun. Wei Wei Bai had saved him, and that was enough to earn their respect. Yu Xiaoyun didn't say anything, but his eyes became even more gloomy. It was as if there was frost on his eyebrows, cold and chilly. He went to the ward next door. He saw Wei Wei Bai with a breathing tube. The rib had grazed the lung. If she hadn't been carrying him and walking forward, her broken bones wouldn't have hurt her internal organs. Yu Xiaoyun sat by the bed and looked at the girl on the bed. She was as thin as a wisp of smoke. She would disappear with a puff of wind. Her face was so thin that it was almost transparent, and her lips had lost their initial color. Yu Xiaoyun reached out and his fingertips slowly came to the back of her hand. Her temperature was too cold. His fingers trembled. He didn't have the heart to hold it, afraid that he would break it. Yu Xiaoyun lowered his eyes and pursed his thin lips. It was as if he couldn't understand why she didn't give up on him despite being so heavily injured. Didn't she feel any pain? Chen Shan didn't dare to make a sound. He stood at the door and watched the two of them secretly. Yu Xiaoyun's side profile was perfect. His eyes turned from cold to soft. Those eyes, which were originally filled with deep affection, were really filled with affection at this moment. The old people in the past said that people with thin lips had short lives and short blessings. When Chen Shan first met Yu Xiaoyun, the other party's eyes were so gentle and beautiful, but for some reason, he felt that he was the kind of person who had a short life. Perhaps it was because his eyes were so affectionate. But there was no life in his eyes. They were so calm and desolate that it was as if they had no soul. How could such a person have any passion? How could a person without passion live for a long time? Chapter 2648. Later, he followed Yu Xiaoyun and felt that he had an obligation to find him a wife. After all, he had a wife to spoil him. If he still acted like an immortal, the wife would beat him twice with a pole and he would be obedient. It seemed that Yu Xiaoyun had probably found a woman who could hold his pole. Chen Shan silently carried the soup and stood at the door obediently. Yu Xiaoyun sat quietly inside the door. His hand was gently holding her slender fingers. This action was maintained for a long time. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 35. Wei Wei Bai felt that she had a hard life. There wasn't a single plane that could make her feel so sweet. If she didn't hurt her body and lungs, she would be sorry for the life support. After lying in the hospital for more than 10 to 20 days, she could finally move back. Yu Xiaoyun and her were brothers and sisters. Because this pretentious big brother insisted on using an elegant wooden crutch and walking smoothly, the ankle wound was hurt again. The doctor was about to jump up and down. It was a light injury and could be injured again. He ordered Yu Xiaoyun to use a wheelchair. He was even afraid that he would act like this when he returned home and cripple his good foot. He must be hospitalized until the ankle bone was almost healed. Fortunately, it was only a light injury. Otherwise, with Yu Xiaoyun's ghostly appearance, the bone wound might really be crippled like what the side mission said. The side mission only asked her to make a phone call. Whether Yu Xiaoyun was crippled or not, it actually had nothing to do with the completion rate. The first small mission was completed. Wei Bai didn't feel relaxed at all, only a sense of endless sadness. Fortunately, she looked at her life points. Fortunately, so much life points made her feel very relieved. She was just waiting to return to reality and hug the leg of Xian Xian. That was her life. On the day of returning, Wei Bai still couldn't move freely. Several nurses helped her into the car, while Yu Xiaoyun supported himself with crutches. When getting in the car, this calm and elegant man bent down slightly and reached out to hold her arm to help her maintain her balance. Back home, everything was. But it could be seen that Yu Xiaoyun was busy. Wei Bai knew that it was to find out who the spy was. If she knew what the mission representative meant, she wouldn't have called him so rashly. After all, Yu Xiaoyun had found out. She would probably be hung on the bridge tomorrow morning and turned into a dried corpse. Yu Xiaoyun looked gentle and gentle. He was the one who destroyed the entire Bai family. On the day she arrived, he was also the one who ordered someone to throw Bai Yanlan out of the window. He looked like a gentleman on the outside, but he was a brutal wolf on the inside. She picked, and finally bought a bewitching product when it was on sale in the supermarket. This thing was not very useful. The only good thing about it was that it worked in groups. When everyone was looking for the traitor, she used this. Even if everyone chose to ignore her uniqueness for a short period of time, no one would suspect her. Although it was not easy to use, it was cheap. Wei Bai had just finished using the bewitching product when she received a message from the system. The group that had attacked them had been completely annihilated. None of them would be able to escape. However, Yu Xiaoyun's internal investigation was still in progress. All the people who had participated in the private room meeting at that time had to be individually examined. Wei Bai felt that this side mission was particularly dangerous. If she was not careful, she would really step on the wrong line. Yu Xiaoyun would know that she was not stupid. The first person he would mess with was her. Fast to read the full article at https://www.sashu.com/fast to txt download at https://www.sashu.com fast to read on your phone. https://m. Sashu.com fast, Chapter 2649. Because she was thinking about the balance between the main storyline and the side quest, Wei Bai didn't sleep well. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Yu Xiaoyun entered the door. He was wearing a black suit, and his pants were wet. It was the smell of blood. His ankle bone was almost healed, so he didn't need crutches. It was just that the fixed bandage on his ankle was still there. Yu Xiaoyun opened the door. Before he went to the bathroom, he deliberately turned behind the screen to look at the figure on the bed. He only saw the girl's long and thick black hair scattered on the pillow. He didn't order anyone to make an extra room for her. They didn't dare. At first, Yu Xiaoyun wanted to chase her away. If she didn't leave, then it didn't matter if he really sold her. Later, he felt that it was not bad to keep a pet. Now he felt that he had some pity for her. After all, her love for him and her feelings were like that of a retard. It made him feel a little moved. Perhaps it was because he had been lonely for too long. Even the love of a retard could make his heart beat faster. Yu Xiaoyun thought again, if she wasn't a retard, he wouldn't be so at ease with her. Yu Xiaoyun turned around and went to take a shower. When he came out again, he was clean. He wiped his hair clean and then went to bed expressionlessly. They still slept on the other side. And he slept on the other side. There was a long distance between them. Yu Xiaoyun covered himself with the blanket and waited for a while. Suddenly, he reached out and gently pulled the large blanket to his side. The girl curled up in the blanket frowned and seemed to be starting to feel cold. The blanket was all pulled to his side by Yu Xiaoyun. The outline of the girl's body in silk pajamas was revealed. Yu Xiaoyun's expression was still calm. He crossed his arms and hugged the back of his head. He rested his head on the pillow and waited silently. The temperature in the room was low. Not long after, the sleeping girl naturally rolled over to him. She rubbed against the blanket and reached out to grab it, wanting to crawl under the blanket. She crawled into a warm embrace. Then, she rubbed against the source of the warmth, her breathing stabilized again, and she continued to sleep. Yu Xiaoyun's expression didn't change at all, as if he knew that she would be like this. Except for when she rubbed against him, his muscles stiffened for a second. He tugged at the blanket and covered her tightly. Then, his fingers naturally hung by her side, and he didn't hug her. Instead, he maintained a natural sleeping posture. It was as if she had hugged him on purpose. And he was just an innocent person being hugged. He had no intention of taking the initiative at all. Yu Xiaoyun closed his eyes and fell into a soft and deep sleep. It was as if with one more person in his arms, the nightmare was far away. After he fell asleep, Wei Wei Bai opened her eyes and stared at him for a long time. Scheming boy. Then she closed her eyes again and went back to sleep. The system and the branch system sat together and watched the show together. The system said, "Get lost. Side quest, I bought a luxurious lobster, abalone, beef, sheep, chicken, duck, and goose hot pot. What if I can't finish it?" Side quest, oh right, it also comes with 5 kilograms of pork. He suddenly felt that his deep and flawless relationship with the host was on the verge of collapse. Wei Wei Bai's injury was getting better day by day, and the doctor came to check on her every day. Until the last time, the doctor finally announced that as long as she didn't do any strenuous exercise, she would be fine. Yu Xiaoyun, who had already recovered his ankle, couldn't help but smile when he heard the news. The way they got along during this time. It was still quiet. He read while she lay beside the chair in a daze, like a cat. He wiped some Chinese musical instruments, and she curiously helped to hold them. Chapter 2650. After he finished his troublesome work, he would make tea and drink it when he was mentally and physically exhausted. The girl beside him would also sit obediently beside him and drink tea with him. Although every time she drank tea, her brows were always furrowed. Yu Xiaoyun really felt that she was quite good like this. She was as quiet as an antique. He liked a quiet and lonely life. Other than necessary work contact, he almost never interacted with outsiders. If it was another woman, he almost didn't dare to imagine how he would get along with them. Wei Wei Bai was like warm air, letting him experience a life without nightmares and loneliness. But there was no sense of noise. If he didn't occasionally see the girl's blank and dull eyes, he might have continued to cruelly ignore her. She was actually a patient. After a long time, not only did his family know that he had a woman by his side, the people outside also gradually knew. This kind of thing was normal for people in this circle. The abnormal one was Yu Xiaoyun. After all, everyone knew Yu Xiaoyun's monk character. A woman who could make him like must be extremely beautiful. Rumors were everywhere. Yu Xiaoyun ignored them all. However, when the rumors were too exaggerated, Yu Xiaoyun began to feel uncomfortable in his heart. After all, the rumored demoness and the quiet little idiot by his side, they were not the same person at all. For the first time, young master Yu considered whether to take Wei Wei Bai out for a walk. At a small private banquet, the people who came were all famous and not very noisy. Yu Xiaoyun dressed Wei Wei Bai in a conservative pink cheongsam and put on a string of Hetian jade beads for her. He dressed her up carefully, just like how he dressed up his favorite doll. Then, he brought the confused girl to the small banquet. Because it was her first time, the girl seemed to be a little afraid of meeting people. At the beginning, she had to exchange pleasantries with others for a long time, so Yu Xiaoyun left her in the lounge. He planned to take her out for a walk after the pleasantries and then go back directly. There were servants in the lounge, so he wasn't worried that she would get lost. Seeing that he had left, the girl raised her big timid eyes and looked at him eagerly. Yu Xiaoyun saw the beautiful lines of her body and the exposed slender white wrist with a jasper bead hanging on it. She was too beautiful for his taste. In that instant, it hit his heart and made him regret bringing her out. Young Master Yu lowered his eyes and turned around to flee. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 40. This was the first time Yu Xiaoyun was so impatient in front of others. He dealt with some people perfunctorily. Then, he hurriedly walked back. Just as he arrived at the entrance of the lounge. Then, she heard a clear and cheerful male voice. Your name is Wei Wei? What a nice name. Let me tell you another joke, okay? Yu Xiaoyun stopped in his tracks. Standing by the door, he couldn't see what the man looked like. However, he happened to see the young girl stretching out her hand to support her chin. Although her eyes were confused, there was a trace of relaxation. She didn't seem to hate the strange man who approached her. Yu Xiaoyun stood silently in the shadows. The young man sounded very happy. Are you laughing? My joke is very funny, right? They were all kind and funny stories that young people liked. The young man grasped them well and showed some sincerity. Wei Weibai didn't say anything, but there seemed to be a smile in her eyes. Without waiting for the other party to tell another joke, a waiter walked into the lounge and lowered his head to say something to the man. The young man's expression changed and he immediately got up. Then I'll leave first. See you next time. The young man walked out of the door and saw Yu Xiaoyun at the door. Yu Xiaoyun's face was indifferent and his eyes were still gentle, as if he didn't care. He glanced at the man who told the joke. He seemed to be the most powerful film emperor in recent years. He was only 21 years old and had a good family background. When the young film emperor just brushed shoulders with him, Yu Xiaoyun's voice was low and cold. There won't be a next time. The film emperor's footsteps paused. He felt that the other party's words contained killing intent and immediately ran away. Wei Weibai was still sitting quietly in the chair. Suddenly, the light went dark. She looked up strangely. The light seemed to be broken? She was about to get up and leave the darkness in the room. To facilitate the next reading, you can click on Chapter 2651. Before she could take a few steps, a hand had already pinched her chin forcefully. The sudden attack made her a little stunned and widened her eyes. Because of the darkness, she couldn't see anything. Only the man's aura was overwhelming, like a robber robbing her of everything, making her unable to breathe. As if she was afraid, she desperately retreated. But the other party was like a cold predator, suppressing her movements in a few steps. The man in the darkness was like a god controlling everything about her. With the gloomy power of punishment, the uncontrollable anger was unusually obvious in his uncontrollable breathing. Wei Weibai staggered and sat down on the chair just now. She was frightened by his grip on her shoulder. Like a moth caught by a cruel prey in the dark night, her fragile wings were being dismantled by him. Her fingers grabbed his clothes and wanted to struggle. Her whole body trembled as she shouted, Yu Xiaoyun, save me. His movements paused. The girl under him was already sobbing. Save me, Yu Xiaoyun. She was so pitiful and weak. Her voice for help made people want to bully her. The man's movements calmed down. His fingers were still tightly clasped around her waist. His fingertips felt the silky texture of the Chong Sam. It was like her skin, but it was a little less warm. He lowered his eyes. In the darkness, his eyes were incomparably deep. The girl trembled non-stop. She was so scared that she couldn't speak. In the past, when others hit her and bullied her, she would only squat and not say a word. But she was so scared when he just touched her a little more roughly. Did he raise her to be delicate? Listening to her whispering his name, asking for help, Yu Xiaoyun finally suppressed all his violent emotions. A kind of secret pity welled up in his heart. It was also like pleasure. After all, she was shouting his name. The man left her trembling body and slowly took a few steps back. Then he turned around and left without hesitation. In the darkness, the girl couldn't see his face. After he left, Wei Weibai immediately jumped up from the chair. She wiped the non-existent tears at the corner of her eyes. Then without hesitation he rushed out. As soon as he stepped out of the door, he saw Yu Xiaoyun standing there. Under the corridor lights, the man revealed a reserved demeanor in his elegance. His suit was still neat and tidy, his cufflinks were buttoned back, and his disheveled tie was neat and tidy. It was as if the person who had just entered wasn't him. Wei Weibai stopped in horror, as if she had been frightened. Yu Xiaoyun looked at her quietly for a few seconds. His thin lips curved slightly, and he smiled gently. His eyes seemed to be filled with stars, and his emotions were as deep as the sea. What's wrong? You haven't seen me for a while and you miss me so much? The suspicion in Wei Weibai's eyes disappeared. Her lips trembled, but she didn't know how to complain. After all, she was used to being bullied. Complaining to others that she had been bullied was too foreign to her. Yu Xiaoyun looked at the young girl who was cowering at the door. Her face was pale, and her round eyes were trembling with fear. She looked at him with longing and fear. He slowly moved forward and placed his hand on the back of her hand. He didn't hold her fingers directly. Instead, he moved his hand up the sleeves of her cheongsam and finally reached her wrist. The bead bracelet on her wrist was gone. It had fallen off when she was struggling. The sound of the jade beads falling to the ground was really pleasant to hear. His eyes darkened and he whispered, "Don't be afraid, I'm back." Chapter 2652. Just as he finished speaking, Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips as if she had been greatly wronged. She burrowed into his arms, hugged his waist, and cried softly. Broken cries. This was the most outgoing expression she had ever shown to someone she trusted. Yu Xiaoyun stood quietly and let her hug him. It was as if he had never done anything bad. The calm and elegant young master Yu only held her delicate and slender wrist bones. His eyelashes lowered, covering the dark evil in his eyes. He let her cry, and her tears soaked his clothes. It was cold and pitiful. However, he felt that the fire in his chest had already risen, and he could no longer suppress it. He pursed his lips. His thin lips were red. He had always been a man who could not be touched by smoke and fire. But at this moment, it was as if he was possessed. His eyes stared at her black hair. His eyes were seductive and deep. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 45. When they returned, Wei Wei Bai was tired from crying and lay in Yu Xiaoyun's arms. His voice was light and warm. Let's not go out in the future. There are bad people outside. Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened, and she did not know how to respond. She did not say anything, nor did she refuse. Yu Xiaoyun seemed to be doing it for her own good. You should have someone to protect you. In the future. He paused for a moment, and his voice was low and hoarse. It was like a lingering sigh. Let me protect you. Wei Wei Bai lay in his arms for a while before she finally realized something and looked up at him timidly. But she only saw that Yu Xiaoyun's jaw seemed to be a little tense. But in the next moment, he revealed a gentle smile. That pair of unusually deceptive eyes were very beautiful and calm. Wei Wei Bai looked at him for a while, and the tension in her eyes eased. She lowered her head and hugged him even harder. It was as if he was her only guardian and support in this dirty and evil world. And a smile appeared in Yu Xiaoyun's eyes. But that smile was dyed with darkness. It was a paranoid emotion similar to possessiveness. Wei Wei Bai did not see Yu Xiaoyun's expression. But she could guess. He's simply a big wolf, a black-bellied big bad guy. He deliberately bullied me and made me afraid to go out so that he could save the trouble of not bringing me out. Tong Tong, who was eating hot pot with the side quest and bragging about his glorious past, heard the host's voice. He suddenly froze and immediately said anxiously, Yes, yes, yes. The big wild wolf is a big bad guy. You can't spoil him. He's asking for it. Wei Wei Bai. Although the voice was not wrong, why did she hear a guilty conscience? Just as he was about to ask further. The car had already reached home, so she gathered her thoughts and did not let them distract her attention. Tong Smash choked on a mouthful of meat. A hand patted him on the back and a gentle voice said, Don't be in such a hurry. Eat slowly. No one is going to snatch it from you. The system looked at him, touched. Then, when he was unprepared, he took the lid of the trash can and smashed it on his head. When he was full, he could defeat more than 10 side missions. This was why he ate hot pot to show goodwill to his enemies. It was to beat the side quest, not to eat delicious food. After returning, she ran to take a shower. Yu Xiaoyun knew that she could take care of herself in this aspect, and also knew why she was so eager to clean herself up. He did not expose her. Instead, he lay on the chair. His fingers played with the cuffs of his sleeves unhurriedly. It was as if he was sure that she would not come out so quickly. Yu Xiaoyun took out an aquamarine bead from his pocket. It was one of the beads that she dropped. Chapter 2653. He pinched and rolled it with his fingertips. The slightly cold jade was eye-catching. He threw the bead in his hand out and it fell into the lake outside the balcony. The lotus leaves in the water had already begun to decay. The lotus leaves that were full of handsome lotus leaves seemed to be showing a ferocious and withered side. Yu Xiaoyun watched for a while. He drank too much wine and did bad things, so his mood fluctuated too much. He closed his eyes tiredly. The nightmare came suddenly. He saw himself standing at the door of the resting room at the banquet just now. The young movie king was telling young jokes that he didn't understand to make the girl in the door happy. The lights in the lounge were unusually bright. But the door he stood at was full of darkness. The pure girl lowered her head and listened carefully to the young man's words. She was young and immature. She probably liked those children who didn't even have hair. After all, only young children had those lively common topics to talk about. And he was full of vicissitudes, hypocritical and mature. He wasn't liked by young people at all. Yu Xiaoyun tilted his head and leaned against the door to watch. His dark shadow slowly began to spread from outside the door to inside the door. That black shadow covered everything as it passed by. It drowned the young man with a blurred face. The bright lights in the lounge also began to be swallowed by the darkness. The girl in the room stood up in horror, but found that she was being suppressed by a dark shadow. She covered her mouth in fear, as if she was offended. Then she ran out of the door without hesitation. She crashed into Yu Xiaoyun's arms. The girl raised her face. Her delicate face had a sense of vulnerability that tempted people to sink into it. It was Wei Bai. Yu Xiaoyun thought calmly. As if she had seen her protector, she reached out and hugged him, shouting, "Yu Xiaoyun, save me!" Yu Xiaoyun stretched out his fingertips. He lowered his head and kissed her black hair. His fingers tightly clasped her wrist bone, and a dark shadow wrapped around her wrist. Yu Xiaoyun heard his evil and hot voice. "Why do you think I can save you?" He revealed a slightly twisted and unusually evil smile. A dark shadow spread behind the man's slender body. That shadow was Yu Xiaoyun's face. The last ray of light sank into the girl's frightened eyes. It would also be Yu Xiaoyun's last shred of conscience. He was completely pulled into the darkness. Yu Xiaoyun suddenly woke up and reached out to cover his chest. His heart was racing. Then he quickly looked up at the bathroom door. The absurd and twisted dream, the girl's despair of not being able to escape, was still in his mind. It had been a long time since he had a nightmare that reflected his inner emotions so clearly. Compared to the nightmares that made him extremely uncomfortable in the past, this was different. However, this dream made him feel that it was only natural. Even if this dream was abnormally evil, he had no intention of stopping himself from falling. The bathroom door opened. Wei Bai was wearing very conservative pajamas. She was like a kitten whose fur had been drenched by the rain. She opened her pair of wet eyes and reached out to grab her collar in fear. Yu Xiaoyun was still lying on the chair, and the scarlet color in his eyes had yet to fade. Wei Bai was about to come over, but when she saw the look in his eyes, she sensitively took a step back. Although she was stupid, her intuition was very accurate. Yu Xiaoyun even wanted to stop hiding, but when he saw her black hair draped over her body like beautiful silk, his voice was still warm and gentle. "Go to bed early. I'm going to take a shower." Chapter 2654. The doubt in Wei Bai's eyes disappeared, and a bright smile appeared. Then she nodded, turned around, and walked behind the screen. Yu Xiaoyun saw her leave and was silent for more than 10 seconds. Only then did he slowly get up. When he reached the bathroom, he turned on the cold water. His skin was boiling hot. Yu Xiaoyun began to tear off his clothes under the cold water. On his slender white back, his beautiful muscles and collarbone contained an invisible strength. Stripped of the clothes created by modern civilization, young Master Yu was like a real hunter at this moment. Terrifying and powerful. His gentle and affectionate eyes were exceptionally clear and sharp even under the ice-cold water. He didn't know how long the water lasted. Only then did he clean up his heat. Yu Xiaoyun, who was wearing silk pajamas, walked out of the bathroom barefoot. Behind the screen, the cat-like figure was already curled up under the blanket. She should be very tired. He took her to a strange place and was frightened and bullied. Her body was extremely weak. He drove back and forth like this. Others might think that it was normal. It was also a heavy burden for her body that had just recovered. Yu Xiaoyun dried his hair himself, not wanting to bring the moisture to bed. Then, he cleaned himself up. The refreshed man calmly went to bed. He was still sleeping on the other side of the bed. When he was about to pull the blanket over, he thought of something and paused. Yu Xiaoyun only hesitated for 3 seconds, and the bottom line in his heart was eaten by impulse. He slowly crawled to the bed and held her in his arms. She was in a deep sleep, and her breathing was almost inaudible. His long silk-like hair was scattered all over his arms. Her warm and sweet breath touched his skin. It was like a kind of medicine that made his blood boil. Yu Xiaoyun hugged her and wrapped the two of them in the blanket. If she was smart, she would find out. He hugged her on purpose, and she didn't lean over of her own accord. Yu Xiaoyun thought calmly, letting her get used to his changes first. He would reveal his true colors in the future. This way, it shouldn't scare her too much. If she waited until his patience ran out, she still wouldn't be able to accept it. Then, we'll talk about it when the time comes. Yu Xiaoyun thought irresponsibly. He didn't think about what would happen if she didn't accept it. It was as if he knew what the consequences would be if she rejected him. Wei Bai felt that Yu Xiaoyun's wolf thoughts were becoming more and more obvious. In the past, she would accompany him while he cleaned the instruments. Now, he was using the excuse of cleaning the instrument as an excuse to touch her fingers and not let go. In the past, when he was writing calligraphy, she would watch him. Now, he was the one who forced her to hold the brush and learn how to write. Then, he would openly hug her waist and take advantage of her. She thought about how this little bastard had pretended to be so pure and simple. The more abstinent a person was, the more flirtatious he was. Wei Bai was a mentally retarded person, but she couldn't expose him. He could only endure it. The rainstorm at the end of summer came again. After a while, the ground was muddy. Yu Xiaoyun had another idea. He said that the lotus roots in the water were all ripe, so they should go and pluck the lotus roots. I've heard of plucking lotuses, but how do you pluck a lotus root? In the end, Wei Bai saw Yu Xiaoyun drain most of the water, roll up his pants, and bend down to dig for the lotus roots with his hands in the muddy soil. She was speechless. He wasn't pretending to be an elegant young master anymore. Was he going to be an old farmer? Although it was Yu Xiaoyun's bad taste, Wei Bai still took off her shoes and stepped on the mud to help. In the end, the man turned around, grabbed her waist, and carried her to a bench by the water, making her sit obediently. He said, "I'll do it." This flirting really had the smell of soil. Wei Bai's toes were stained with mud. Her white and cute feet were covered with delicate lotus root soil. She held her chin and thought, what if dinner was lotus root stewed with pork ribs? Or lotus root stir-fried with shredded pork? Although Yu Xiaoyun was a vegetarian, he didn't force her to eat with him. That was why she had gained 3 pounds recently. Sideline, how about hot pot? Wei Bai, lotus root doesn't go well with hot pot. Sideline, that's true. Do your feet hurt? Wei Bai finally reacted. Oh, isn't this a sideline? Sideline. Small task. Let the male lead bring you water to wash your feet. It's very romantic to wash your feet, isn't it? By Wei. At the crossover system, Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.session.com. Download fast. Read the full text. 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 Fast. Chapter 2655. The new side quest was to make Yu Xiaoyun bring her water to wash her feet. He had to wash her feet? Wei Bai immediately thought of Yu Xiaoyun wearing servant clothes. He walked with his pitiful little feet, swaying with each step. He was like a little pitiful being oppressed by a landlord. Holding a copper basin of water to wash her feet, she put on blush and smiled flatteringly. Come, master, this servant will wash your feet. This was the so-called career queen line of the side quest, making Yu Xiaoyun become a damn little man to serve her? So the true face of her so-called career line was like this? Wei Bai looked at her feet that were stained with lotus root mud with a strange sluggish expression. This was the bad thing about the mentally retarded character. She couldn't say it. How could she let Yu Xiaoyun see her intention to wash her feet just by looking at him with longing eyes? It didn't matter in the past. Now, Yu Xiaoyun felt that he was gradually showing the ferocious face of a beast. Did he really think that she was mentally retarded with that little action? She was afraid that her eyes would express too much pity, and in addition to her pitiful temperament, Yu Xiaoyun couldn't take it anymore, and his moral sense collapsed. What if he conspired against her? Conspiring against her was a small matter, but wouldn't it be a loss if she didn't give him any favorability points after that? Wei Wei Bai lowered her head and looked at her feet. Yu Xiaoyun carefully took out a beautiful lotus root from the soil and washed the soil clean. When he looked up, he saw the girl hiding next to the beginning of the decline of the lotus leaves. Her small neck was as white as the whitest lotus root. Her drooping eyelashes made her misty eyes look deep and beautiful. His gaze slowly lowered and saw that her feet were curled up in confusion. Her toes, which were as delicate as jade beads, were as tender as a child's. When they were stained with the delicate mud, they looked even cuter. Yu Xiaoyun held the lotus root and stared at her toes expressionlessly for a long time. Then, as if he couldn't stand it, he reluctantly looked away. The lotus root in his hand was broken by his fingers and fell into the mud. Once a corner of the lotus root was broken and soaked in muddy water, it was inedible. Yu Xiaoyun knew that his mind was restless, so he took the remaining half of the lotus root and walked over. Wei Wei Bai looked up at him in shock. Then, when he saw Yu Xiaoyun, his expression softened. Yu Xiaoyun came to her side, and a gentle smile appeared on his pale and flawless face. Let's go back. His interest seemed to no longer be in those romantic affairs, writing brushes, ink, paper, and inkstone, or listening to the rain with lotus leaves. All the things that had helped him cultivate his body and mind and calm his nerves in the past. Their emotions were churning, and their qi and blood were surging. Because of the child beside him. Wei Wei Bai raised her head slowly. Under the slightly warm sunlight, she saw Yu Xiaoyun smile. As if it was her instinct, she couldn't help but reveal a cute smile. Her smile was filled with trust, making her seem even more pure and childish. Yu Xiaoyun tightened his grip on the lotus root and almost crushed it. He felt that there might be something wrong with him. Seeing her smile like this, a sharp heat surged into his head. Bullying her seemed to have become the darkest thought in his heart. Wei Wei Bai didn't seem to notice his beast-like dangerous gaze. She moved her feet strangely, wanting to stand up. Yu Xiaoyun reached out and grabbed her arm to help her stand up. Her calves were exposed from the hem of her cheongsam. Her jade-like calves and exquisite ankles were stained with mud. She seemed to be a little uncomfortable. After all, although she was bullied in the Bai family, she was not short of material things. Chapter 2656. She actually liked cleanliness. She also liked to wear shoes. And he preferred her to wear a cheongsam and walk around his house barefoot. It was as if this could satisfy some unspeakable metaphorical thoughts in his heart. Yu Xiaoyun still held her hand indifferently as they walked back. He didn't show any other enthusiasm at all. When they reached the door, Wei Wei Bai suddenly stopped in her tracks. Her feet were covered in mud, and she didn't want to go in. After all, the house was full of clean carpets and wooden floors. Once she stepped in, it would tarnish this cleanliness. It would be too obvious. Yu Xiaoyun also seemed to have just reacted. He turned around and asked hypocritically, "What's wrong?" Wei Wei Bai lowered her head and didn't say anything, but her eyes kept falling on her feet. Yu Xiaoyun looked down at her feet and stared for a few seconds before he suddenly realized and said, "Are your feet dirty?" Wei Wei Bai immediately raised her head and looked at him with bright eyes. Yu Xiaoyun had already thrown the lotus roots and the like to the bodyguards at home to dig up and wash them. He reached out and carried her in his arms. Then he walked directly into the house. Wei Wei Bai looked at him nervously, as if she was still not used to being so close to him. Yu Xiaoyun was very calm and natural, as if holding her was no different from holding a dog. Wei Wei Bai's nervousness was also affected by him, and her nerves were soothed. He put her on the chair. When Yu Xiaoyun lowered his head, the tip of his nose rubbed against her clean hair. It was slightly cool and had the fragrance of a young girl. He narrowed his eyes and pursed his lips, as if he was enjoying something. Then he straightened up and said to her, "I'll go get the bathwater for you. Take a bath and you'll be able to wash your feet clean." Washing feet and taking a bath. Although it was essentially washing. But one was washing too much. Did the side quest recognize this? Wei Wei Bai was about to ask when she heard the side quest sneer, "Be a little promising and have some face. Taking a bath will block you in minutes, and you still want to complete the mission. Dream on. Hurry up and press the male lead's head and let him wash your feet. Hurry up and ignite your ambition as the female lead. Don't just eat and wait to die. You're a professional little white flower. Wei Wei Bai. Then she heard the sound of a fly swatter hitting a fly. Then the system said calmly, what he means is that taking a bath is not the same as washing your feet. If you want to wash your feet, you have to wash your feet properly. Wei Wei Bai. Okay, she got it. After listening to this explanation, Wei Wei Bai immediately jumped down from the chair. She remembered that there were antique foot wash basins in this house. Love garden, this damned place. It was built for by Yanlan's mother. Her mother was an antique enthusiast. Every time old Master Bai missed the woman he loved, he would collect antiques. No matter what kind of antiques they were, as long as they were expensive. As for that foot washing basin, it was said that Yang Guifei had washed her feet in it. After listening to this antique story, she was speechless. Amen. Antique dealers were really going all out to make money. They were even better at bullshitting than those who wrote novels. Wei Wei Bai found a foot washing basin in a corner. It was quite big. She was worried that Yu Xiaoyun would not understand what she meant, so she immediately got half a basin of foot washing water from the water under the lotus leaf outside. Then, she slowly and laboriously walked into the room. Even a fool could tell that she wanted to wash her feet and did not want to take a bath. Moreover, she could not hold the foot washing basin with her small arms and legs. Yu Xiaoyun had to come over and help. If he helped, it would be like carrying the foot washing basin. Then, she would immediately put her feet into the foot washing basin and pretend that he had washed her feet. A perfect plan. Sure enough, when Yu Xiaoyun walked out of the bathroom, he saw Wei Wei Bai struggling to hold the foot washing basin. The water in the basin was about to splash out. For a moment, it was funny that her small body was holding such a clumsy thing. Yu Xiaoyun was stunned for a few seconds before he took a few steps forward and took her foot washing basin. He looked down at her feet. The mud on her feet had already covered the floor. Only then did Wei Wei Bai realize that she had done something wrong. Her toes curled up, and she lowered her head, not daring to say anything. Yu Xiaoyun smiled and did not care. It was a pity that the bathtub full of hot water in the bathroom was wasted. He put the foot washing basin beside the chair and waved at her. Come and wash your feet. Wei Wei Bai. Hee hee, half of the side quest is completed. Chapter 2657. Then, she happily sat on the chair and immediately put her feet into the foot basin. Her feet were originally covered in mud, so they were cleaned in an instant. Yu Xiaoyun's expression changed. His fingers touched the water in the basin. Was it cold? Without thinking much, he held her feet with both hands and pulled them out of the water. The man's face was a little gloomy. You're not in good health. Don't touch cold water. Wei Wei Bai flinched, as if she didn't understand his words. Only then did Yu Xiaoyun realize that his displeasure was too obvious. He valued her too much. As a result, it was a little unbearable for him to lose control of her. Yu Xiaoyun slowly breathed a sigh of relief and suppressed his abnormal possessiveness. He took the foot basin out and splashed the water out. All the bodyguards who were sorting out the lotus roots saw young Master Yu, who had always been elegant, come out with the foot basin. Everyone looked at each other. They felt that the contrast was too great, and they were stunned for a moment. When Yu Xiaoyun returned to the room with the foot basin, a new round of hot rumors began to circulate again. Young Master Yu served the little retard water to wash her feet. Young Master Yu bathed the little retard. Young Master Yu knelt on the keyboard at home. Young Master Yu had no human rights at home. His private money was given to the white vixen, and he was squeezed dry every day. He worked like a cow and ate while kneeling. The rumors made everyone believe. Yu Xiaoyun turned out to be a henpecked man. Yu Xiaoyun didn't expect that when he went out with the foot basin, the group of maids and men at home would have a strange change in the rumor circle. He came in with the heavy foot basin. He saw Wei Wei Bai's feet on the wooden cross under the chair. She lowered her head, and her black hair fell on her shoulders. She was well-behaved, obedient, and clever. Her pink face was exceptionally cute. During this period of hard work, she took care of her. Finally, Wei Wei Bai had a trace of warmth and softness. Bai Wei Wei was counting her toes, and then she was tearing at the side task. You die, I live. Just now, you should be considered finished washing your feet. The watch. Is that washing your feet? Touch your conscience and ask if it hurts. Wei Wei Bai said. I touched and asked. It doesn't hurt. Xiao Biao. He had forgotten that this was a green tea who had no moral integrity and a low moral bottom line. She walked the world by selling her pitiful and vicious image as a little white flower. How could he have a conscience? Wei Wei Bai said, "Isn't it just putting your feet into the basin and taking them out after washing them? Don't go back on your word." Xiao Biao, there's a time limit for foot washing. The system came out and whispered, "No, just now the small mission notification popped up. I took a look at his mission list and it was completed. He's lying to you." Xiao Biao. Wei Wei Bai. Ha ha ha. The system chewed on the roast duck leg given by the side quest. He. At this moment, the branch leader suddenly felt his heart ache. Wei Wei Bai was in a good mood after winning against the little bitch. Just as she was about to step off the chair, a pair of pampered and powerful hands held her feet. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. She saw that Yu Xiaoyun had already put the basin beside her. It was full of warm water. He was half squatting. His palms were white and there were no traces of work as he held her feet. The man's fingers gently stroked her toes. As if inadvertently, the feathers brushed past her numb. It made Wei Wei Bai's toes tremble. She wanted to escape. However, the man chuckled softly. "I'm not going to wash my feet." As he spoke, he nonchalantly placed her feet into the warm water. Chapter 2658. Although it was comfortable, she didn't want to wash it anymore. Because her mission was completed. Before Wei Wei Bai could think of how to protest, Yu Xiaoyun's voice was extremely low. "Wei Wei's feet are dirty. If you don't wash them, they won't look good." His words were a little gentle. But his fingers were gentle as he rubbed her toes. A grown man was squatting down to wash her feet. He didn't put on any airs at all. If she was really retarded, she would believe it. When Yu Xiaoyun deliberately increased his strength again and held the soles of her feet, his fingertips scraped across her skin. When she started to tremble uncontrollably, she finally understood. Was this foot washing? This was a fucking hooligan. Yu Xiaoyun's eyes gradually darkened. His thin lips were pursed tightly, and he could even feel his temples throbbing crazily. He lowered his eyes, and a hint of red appeared on his pale face. His beautiful and slender fingers gently brushed across the watermarks in the warm water. It stirred up ripples in the basin. Wei Wei Bai looked at him in confusion. She seemed to feel that she couldn't take it anymore and wanted to take her feet out. But when she moved, the strength of the man's fingers was astonishingly great. He pressed her feet into the water and made it impossible for her to move. "Don't move. It's not clean yet." "Not clean yet?" Wei Wei Bai looked at her feet that were wrinkled from the soaking. The skin was about to go bald. "Not clean yet?" Yu Xiaoyun looked up. The strong desire to plunder in his eyes made him have a few more traces of fierce desire. He repeated again. As he spoke softly, his thin lips seemed to be stained with blood. "You have to wash it clean." Wei Wei Bai. This didn't seem like he was going to wash her feet. He was going to chop off her feet. Wei Wei Bai had experienced the most traumatizing foot washing in her life. Her toes were aching faintly, and her skin was pale and wrinkled from the blisters. In the end, she wrapped herself in the blanket aggrievedly and curled up in the corner of the wall, looking at Yu Xiaoyun with dissatisfaction. Yu Xiaoyun, on the other hand, was in a good mood. He got on the bed with a calm and collected attitude. On the contrary, it made Wei Wei Bai feel wronged and at a loss. Looking at Wei Wei Bai, who had wrapped herself into a pitiful ball, Yu Xiaoyun seemed to be watching a beautiful scene. Just like that. He occupied one side of the bed and stared at her with his deep and calm eyes. Because his gaze was so focused, Wei Wei Bai turned her head away in fear. Yu Xiaoyun could only reach out and rub the bridge of his nose helplessly. He knew that his gradual display of aggression had scared her. And such a Wei Wei Bai. His mind was pure and young. He would feel guilty about doing anything to her. Yu Xiaoyun could only lie on the bed helplessly and convince himself to be patient. After all, Wei Wei Bai's illness was caused by fear and beatings. This kind of self-isolation was actually different from autism. They were capable of self-growth, self-healing, and self-maturing. During this period of time, Wei Wei Bai was much smarter than before. She should be considered a few years older. Yu Xiaoyun was even considering whether to hire a psychiatrist for her or something. Thinking of this, he raised his head and looked at Wei Wei Bai. However, He found that she was already sitting and leaning against the headboard, asleep. Yu Xiaoyun smiled, immediately got up, approached her, and slowly put her on the bed. Then he lowered his head and kissed her eyelashes. It was as if he was kissing his most precious collection. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 50. After getting along with each other for a long time, the favorability was accumulated bit by bit. However, the favorability stopped at 50 and didn't move. Wei Bai knew that people had different personalities. Read at https://www.sashu.com. Download read on the phone. https://m. Sashu.com. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the Chapter 2659. A man like Yu Xiaoyun was not the kind of person who could get along with his feelings. As long as there was no other stimulation. 50 favorability points was probably the limit. The remaining favorability points had to be brushed up by some other methods. Wei Bai was wearing a light green Chong Sam. She was as beautiful and fresh as a tender leaf in spring. She leaned over the table curiously and watched Yu Xiaoyun holding a piece of warm lotus root starch and a jade token. He was tying tassels. Yu Xiaoyun said in a low voice, "The quality of this jade is not bad. It's a blessed peace token. Take it and play with it." He liked to give her some strange things. Brushes, paintings, jade bracelets or beads, makeup and flower hairpins. Even the jade token he gave her had to be personally consecrated at the temple before he took it home to design tassels or something. This kind of man was really pretentious to the bone. He made himself look like an immortal. In fact, he was still a hungry wolf in his bones. Wei Bai had been getting along very well with him during this period of time, so she was not afraid at all. Instead, she looked at the jade token with anticipation, as if she liked his gift very much. Yu Xiaoyun finished tying the pale white tassels and put the jade token into her hand. "Tomorrow is your birthday. What gift do you like?" Wei Bai was touching the token. It was moist and cool, and it felt first class in the summer temperature. She smiled, as cute as a naive child. But she ignored Yu Xiaoyun's words. Yu Xiaoyun did not care. She had always been like this. She could not say more than a few words a week. The most familiar words were to call his name. Yu Xiaoyun was already satisfied. A few figures suddenly appeared outside the door. It was Chen Shanqi and a few members. Yu Xiaoyun saw them. He put down the remaining tassels in his hand and said to Wei Bai, "I'll leave for a while." Wei Bai looked up at him in a daze. But she found that he had already lowered his head and kissed her cheek. These kisses were very premeditated. At first, it was her hair. Then it was probing the side of her ear. Now it was her face. Next time it would probably be her lips. Moreover, he appeared unusually calm and natural, as if it was normal for him to do so. Wei Bai did not expose him. Instead, she looked at him blankly for a moment before lowering her head to play with the jade tablet again. Yu Xiaoyun turned around and left. When his back was facing her, he also heaved a sigh of relief. After all, he had to restrain himself from continuing to kiss her. This was indeed a very difficult thing to do. The recent meetings were all about the most critical projects in the transition period. Only after taking over the Bai family did he realize that although he had inherited a large amount of wealth, it was not enough. He also inherited a lot of trouble. Yu Xiaoyun put in a lot of effort to deal with these troubles. It was also troublesome to manage the wealth. It had to be used precisely for the transformation project. One wrong step and all would be for naught. Towards the end of the meeting, Yu Xiaoyun's expression did not look good. It was pure exhaustion. He dealt with those trivial but extremely important matters with an expressionless face. He couldn't help but think about how to make Wei Bai happy tomorrow. After all, it was her birthday. She had never celebrated her birthday before. This day was a disaster for the old man of the Bai family. The woman he loved the most had died on this day. Not to mention celebrating Wei Bai's birthday. If he saw Wei Bai on this day, he would have the heart to beat her to death. Yu Xiaoyun thought of her days in the past, and his eyes turned cold. Then he thought of when he was young. He had seen her being abused several times, but he did not stop her at all. Instead, he looked at her from afar, as if it had nothing to do with him. He suddenly regretted being so cold-hearted, even if he had helped her at that time. Full text. Download. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the Chapter 2660. So that when he thought of her like this, his heart would ache. Wasn't he one of the people who added fuel to the fire when she became like this? The Bai family couldn't raise a pure child. Wei Bai could be considered an accident. But this accident was better not to happen. After all, this place was a dirty pit. If she was too good and pure, she would seem out of place. Sooner or later, she would be destroyed. Fortunately, before she was destroyed, he destroyed the Bai family. He also saved her. Yu Xiaoyun heaved a sigh of relief and finished the last work. Then, he got up and bid farewell to the noisy meeting room. The meeting wasn't over yet, but he planned to bid farewell in advance. One of the most heated discussions at the meeting was the attack on him last time. They still hadn't found out how his whereabouts were leaked. Although everyone felt that they had missed something during the investigation, there was still no real progress. The only progress was that the force that attacked them was completely defeated and destroyed. A few fish might have escaped the net, but it didn't matter. Yu Xiaoyun looked at the scenery in the love garden. Everything here was still the same as before. He liked this place only because he was used to living here. He was like this. Once he was used to something, it was very difficult to change it. For example, when he was used to hating Bai Yanlan, he would be disgusted to the point of vomiting. Even if she used everything together, she wasn't worth his attention. When he was used to scheming to destroy the Bai family, he would spend all his effort to scheme and risk his life. When he was used to living here, he would always live here. It didn't matter if the memories here were a nightmare to him or not. Speaking of nightmares, he seemed to have fewer nightmares recently. Yu Xiaoyun knew that he had already started to get used to the days when he had Wei Bai. He was used to her existence, used to her eating with him, sleeping with him. She wanted to play with him and have some elegant interests. He was even used to doing some things to her in his dreams, things that belonged to the obsession of a man's demon. Yu Xiaoyun stopped in his tracks. Once this habit was formed, perhaps liking her would become a small habit that couldn't be changed. It was a little dangerous. Yu Xiaoyun examined his feelings and wondered if he should take advantage of the fact that he hadn't really gotten used to it, and send her away for a period of time. Otherwise, if it became a true obsession, he might have one more weakness. With old Master Bai as an example, he was extremely disdainful of the so-called love. If you love a woman, you can indulge everything that woman brings. This was simply insane. All kinds of complicated thoughts were running through his mind, but Yu Xiaoyun still calmly returned to the house. He saw Wei Bai looking down at the words he had written. Her round eyes were misty, like a curious and confused cat. She tilted her neck and carefully looked at the ink spread out on the table. After looking at it curiously for a while, Wei Bai touched it gently with her fingertips. The young girl was sitting sideways. Her beautiful figure was outlined by the light green cheongsam that was like a leaf. His ink-black hair fell to his waist, shining with a satin luster, pure and beautiful to the extreme. Yu Xiaoyun stood in a daze for a while before slowly coming back to his senses. He walked over. He had already returned to normal, but he couldn't control his fingers as he gently stroked her hair. The silky touch of her hair passed through his fingers. Yu Xiaoyun's expression was calm. "Do you like my words?" Wei Bai understood what he meant. Her reaction was a little slow as she nodded. Yu Xiaoyun picked up the brush and said to her, "I'll write a few more for you. Is there anything you like?" Wei Bai lowered her eyes and didn't say anything. She seemed to be thinking, but also seemed to be in a daze. Just when Yu Xiaoyun thought that she wouldn't open her mouth like before, she said, "Yu Xiaoyun." Yu Xiaoyun paused for a moment before he reacted. However, he heard the young girl's figure with a hint of stubbornness. "I like it, Yu Xiaoyun." Yu Xiaoyun felt that his heart was beating uncontrollably like a drum. He pursed his lips and turned his face away. His breathing was heavy and hot. The brush in his hand even trembled a little. Yu Xiaoyun calmed down his reaction and quickly wrote his name on the white paper. The dragon and phoenix dance was a little rushed. After he finished writing, he said, "Do you like it?" In fact, he didn't expect her to understand the double entendre of his question. The next second, the young girl had already leaned over and gently kissed him on the cheek. Then, before he could react, She had already turned around and jogged behind the screen. She carefully grabbed the edge of the screen with both hands and secretly peeked out her eyes to look at him. She was like a cat that had done something bad, pitiful and cute, with a hint of stubbornness. Yu Xiaoyun blinked, and then couldn't help but touch his cheek. Then, he turned around and saw the small figure behind the screen. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up into a smile. Perhaps, it wouldn't be bad to have a little habit of liking her existence. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 55. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. Chapter 2661. Everything in the Bai family had slowly disappeared. The distribution of benefits and the restarted projects were all transferred to Yu Xiaoyun's resources at a slow but safe speed. His style of doing things was like his person. Warm and steady. Except for the ruthlessness and violence when he took down the Bai family. For the rest of the time, one couldn't see how anxious his personality was. Wei Bai didn't care about Yu Xiaoyun's career at all. What she paid attention to was the main storyline strategy. After all, the main storyline mission's favorability rose too slowly. The favorability was like a turtle's speed. Since the last time her luck rose to 55, it had been almost a month. The favorability stopped at 60. The reason why she came to 60 was that Yu Xiaoyun had started to kiss and hug her regardless of the occasion or time. Just like his style of doing things was gentle. When he wanted a girl, he would take his time. Step by step, he used his own rhythm to erode her. If she was really a retard, she would really think that his attitude was very natural and his kisses were very pure. She would never think of that. Moreover, there was a psychiatrist recently. She was a woman from abroad. She was in her 30s and was an authoritative expert in psychology. She was also blonde and had a hot body. Wei Bai didn't dare to be arrogant in front of such an expert. It was very hard for her to pretend. After all, a psychiatrist was different from Yu Xiaoyun. Although Yu Xiaoyun was smart and had good observation skills, his main job wasn't to keep an eye on her. She could slack off or sneer a few times. Yu Xiaoyun was busy with his career, so he definitely didn't have time to care about her. It was time for her to get off work as well. She wanted to have some fun and relax her expression. But ever since the psychiatrist came, she had been pretending for 24 hours a day. After all, the psychiatrist's job was to keep an eye on you all the time. Wei Bai said, "I'm dog-tired." The blonde beauty had a kind expression on her face. She played and drew with her as if she was chatting. Wei Bai held a brush and drew the ink painting that Yu Xiaoyun had taught her. Of course, Yu Xiaoyun was drawing a real ink painting. She painted graffiti. The psychiatrist's name was Mina, and she was of mixed Chinese and English descent. Her facial features were more English, but they were soft and pleasing to the eye. Wei Bai didn't have any objections to her and looked at the information. She found out that she was Yu Xiaoyun's university classmate. They were both straight-A students. Although they didn't talk much, they could still call each other senior sister and junior brother. As a conscientious retard, Wei Bai ignored everything and kept her ears shut. Anyway, other than Yu Xiaoyun, she didn't say a word. Therefore, no matter what Mina asked her, she would only gently raise her eyes and stare at her with those pure, innocent, beautiful and ignorant eyes. He stared at the beautiful psychiatrist until she felt embarrassed. Then, he lowered his head and continued to scribble. Mina wasn't embarrassed, nor was she angry. Instead, she felt that this was normal. She began to analyze Wei Bai's drawing. It was very suitable for a mentally handicapped person. It was just that he couldn't see any valuable emotions at all. During this period of time, Wei Bai had been very cooperative with the psychiatrist's game. There was never any confrontation, but it was only cooperation. There was nothing else. After so many days, the treatment effect was abnormally bad. Mina felt that the treatment effect was so bad that it was an insult to her brilliant career as a psychiatrist. She looked at Wei Bai, who had her head lowered and was scribbling with a brush. The girl was exceptionally delicate and beautiful. Her pink skin, black silk-like hair, and thick ink-like beauty made people unable to help but be subdued at a glance. Quick Transmigration System. Male God, come here. Chapter 2662. Given her age, Many girls of this age could enchant others just by looking at their bare faces. Not to mention Wei Wei Bai's appearance. When Mina saw her for the first time, she still had a feeling. A delicate canary that did not belong to the human world, fragile and beautiful. Just looking at it made her want to destroy it. She could even keenly sense the change in Yu Xiaoyun. His abnormal and crazy possessiveness towards the girl in front of him was getting out of control. Mina stared blankly at Wei Wei Bai for a while, then suddenly reached out and touched the back of her hand. Bai Weiwei seemed a little strange as she raised her head. Her pure and innocent eyes stared straight at her. Although she knew that she did not know anything. But for a moment, Mina even felt that her thoughts were seen through by the girl. This made her fingers tighten a little. Her nails almost dug into the back of her hand. Weiwei Bai's fingers trembled, and a trace of moisture appeared in her eyes. Mina reacted and immediately retracted her hand. She said with a smile, "Let me see what Xiao Wei drew." After saying that, she took her drawing and studied it. But she did not mention the red mark on the back of the girl's hand. Wei Wei Bai held the pen and sat on the chair obediently as if she did not feel pain. The system said, "Be careful of her, she's Yu Xiaoyun's fanatic fan." Wei Wei Bai said indifferently, "It's okay, her current treatment plan is normal." When she came, Wei Wei Bai and the system had already gone through the information. The big sister in front of her had been secretly in love with Yu Xiaoyun for 10 years. But Yu Xiaoyun was like a block of ice, looking at everyone as if they were dead. Plus, at that time, there was a blatant fanatic fan like Bai Yanlon. So it made Mina, who was secretly in love with him, inconspicuous. Even Yu Xiaoyun did not realize that this woman was secretly in love with him. After all, it was very easy for a psychologist to hide their emotions. Over the years, Mina had made achievements in her field. So, Yu Xiaoyun wanted to find a psychologist, which was why he found her. Most psychiatrists were men, and it was difficult to find a woman whom he knew well. This was also the reason why Yu Xiaoyun chose Mina. For Yu Xiaoyun, it was already unbearable for others to get close to Wei Wei Bai. If the other party was still a man, then he would not be able to suppress his jealousy. Moreover, Yu Xiaoyun had a dark guess in his heart. Wei Wei Bai was too eye-catching. Moreover, her temperament was too special. At first, he thought that he was a psychopath who wanted to bully her every time he saw her. The strange, destructive longing for her. Morbid to the point of trembling. Later on, she realized that everyone more or less had the desire to destroy her. He even had the thought of ravaging her. Only because she was his now. Only then did the covetous gazes lessen. This made Yu Xiaoyun almost unable to tolerate this kind of thing. He wished that he could keep her in the house. Try not to meet them as much as possible to avoid being remembered by others. Her appearance and temperament were too dangerous. This was also the reason why Yu Xiaoyun could not let other men get close to her. Who knew if those men would be attracted to her? And Mi Na was obviously a better choice. Mi Na glanced at the picture that was scribbled on and finally gave up analyzing the picture. Wei Wei Bai's heart seemed to be blank. There was almost no emotion worth studying. The tepid treatment plan did not have any effect on her at all. Chapter 2663. If it weren't for the fact that Wei Wei Bai was like this, she would have suspected that she wasn't a normal person. She just liked to be in a daze. Mi Na revealed a gentle smile and wanted to hold Wei Wei Bai's hand again. However, Wei Wei Bai wasn't as indifferent as before this time. Her fingers trembled and she couldn't wait to retract them. The man who had just walked in happened to see the scene of her retracting her hand. Only then did Mi Na realize that Yu Xiaoyun had come in. She didn't show any expression on her face and just calmly retracted her hand. "Mr. Yu, you're back." Yu Xiaoyun nodded indifferently, then walked directly to the chair and reached out to carry Wei Wei Bai. The girl in a lavender cheongsam was easily carried into his arms. The girl, who looked like an exquisite jade doll just now, blushed slightly. The faint crimson color was like a rose, gorgeous and shy. Yu Xiaoyun said to Mi Na, "It's time for today's treatment." Mi Na didn't hesitate at all. She picked up her briefcase and immediately got up to leave. When she walked to the door, she turned her head to take a look before she left. She saw that the calm elegance in the eyes of the always cold, ascetic, elegant, and beautiful young Master Yu had disappeared. He was like a hunter who had waited for a long time and lost his patience. He held the girl's face with both hands and even lowered his head impatiently. He didn't care at all about how weak the other party's mind was. If it weren't for the fact that the girl had just become an adult, this kind of behavior was already a crime. Mina turned around and pinched her palm hard with her fingers. Then, she left without saying a word. On Yu Xiaoyun's side, when his fingertips touched the back of the girl's hand, he found a red mark on the back of his hand. It was like a fingernail mark. Such a faint mark shouldn't have been discovered. However, Wei Wei Bai's skin was too delicate, and any trace of a mark could be magnified. Yu Xiaoyun frowned, and a thought flashed through his mind. As if casually, he asked in a low voice, "Does the back of your hand hurt? What made it?" Wei Wei Bai looked at him blankly. Her face turned even redder, but she didn't answer. He didn't see anything wrong with her expression, and wondered if he was making a mountain out of a molehill. Yu Xiaoyun touched her lips with his finger and said in a low voice, "It's okay. If you don't like her, remember to tell me." The psychiatrist could be changed. In fact, it was good that she was always like this. Yu Xiaoyun didn't want to face the growing despicable darkness in his heart. He lowered his head and his fingers came to her delicate neck. The sunlight shone into the wooden table, elongating their shadows, until they fused together and became inseparable. The room was filled with the smell of ink. Occasionally, the sweet and soft voice of a young girl could be heard. There were also men who slowly and dangerously comforted her. Mina decided to pass her treatment plan to Yu Xiaoyun. Her condition is more serious, and she needs more in-depth intervention. I need some more intense methods. Yu Xiaoyun had just returned from work and was sitting in an armchair with his hands folded on his knees. His attitude was indifferent, and his movements were graceful and slow as he flipped through the booklet of proposals. Yu Xiaoyun looked at the detailed proposals and knew that for a mental patient, this kind of proposal would indeed be effective. However, the process was to dig up the pain in Wei Wei Bai's heart. One of the desensitization treatments was to let her feel as much of the damage she had suffered as possible. Yu Xiaoyun casually took a pen from his suit pocket and began to cross out some treatments that were very effective, but he didn't allow them to appear on Wei Wei Bai. /T Chapter 2664. Mina's face darkened when she saw his actions. Every plan was the painstaking work of a psychiatrist. It might cause this plan to fail at the last moment. Yu Xiaoyun finally threw the plan back to Mina. You can increase the treatment, but you can't make her unhappy. Yu Xiaoyun's last sentence was heavy and fierce. For the first time, a calm and elegant expression appeared on his fair face. It was a stern warning, and even his calm eyes were filled with hostility. Mina's body stiffened and immediately showed a forced smile. Of course, Mr. Yu. Yu Xiaoyun reached out to support himself on the armrest and stood up indifferently. A mature man, even if his face still looked unusually young, like a 17-year-old schoolboy. However, the elegance and steadiness of his every move, which had been settled by time, was not something that any young boy could compare to. He left with his back to Mina. His footsteps were even a little hurried. Mina knew that he was going to see that girl. With a simple analysis of Yu Xiaoyun's mentality and behavior, one could see his infatuation with that girl. In fact, he never hid it. Mina stood for a long time. Looking at the messy plan in her hand, she slowly smiled. In fact, it didn't matter if this plan could be given out or not. All she wanted was more time. Wei Wei Bai found that the treatment plan was wrong. After sending Yu Xiaoyun away, it was troublesome enough to deal with Mina. In the end, she found that this big sister had actually tampered with the treatment plan. On the surface, it was to let her recall her experience of being beaten so that she would get used to it and walk out of it. But what Mina did was to hypnotize her. If it weren't for the system raising her salary, she would have ignored the other party's repeated hints. Hints and hypnosis could kill a person, especially a person with mental problems. And what Mina did was to slowly fill her heart with the most tragic experiences she had gone through in bits and pieces. Then, it worsened and deepened her condition, coupled with the occasional hint of suicide. This was complete. A one-stop service to send her to the West to destroy her psychological state was formed. This plan was very similar to desensitization treatment. That was why he could hide it from Yu Xiaoyun. If Bai Weiwei was the original owner, it was estimated that within a few months, she would have to accept the psychological suggestion to jump off a building. This bitch Mina, she pretended to be so calm and magnanimous, killing without blinking and leaving no traces behind. Unfortunately, Wei Wei Bai said that she didn't feel any pain from the original owner's experience. Therefore, she only felt annoyed by all the hints and hypnosis. Moreover, if the treatment didn't work after a long time, she wouldn't commit suicide. She reckoned that Mi Na, who was Yu Xiaoyun's fanatic crush, would think of other ways to kill her. He had seen too many perverts. Mina was considered a little pervert, but she was so perverted that she had no standards. Wei Wei Bai said to the system, "Find a chance to get rid of this fake doctor." The system was about to nod. Side quest. Hee. Wei Wei Bai and the system were confused. Side quest. Do you miss me? Bai Wei Wei and the system both lazily shook their heads. Their faces were expressionless, indifferent, and light. Their hearts were like dead ashes. Side quest. Small task. Please personally help your cute psychiatrist to steal the male lead's recent confidential documents for the Hainan Airlines project. After saying that, the side quest showed a sinister smile. Personally hand the confidential documents to your psychiatrist, Mi Na. She had personally emphasized this to Mina. Wei Wei Bai couldn't take advantage of any loopholes. This mission, in fact, had never appeared as suddenly as it did now. Wei Wei Bai was just about to deal with Mi Na, but the side quest rolled out, asking her to help the other party complete some stupid spy task. Wei Wei Bai thought for a long time. Finally she sighed. Yu Xiaoyun doesn't have it easy. Even the person who has a crush on him is scheming against his assets. What a pitiful girl. She would let him kiss her a few more times at night. Then she wouldn't find him annoying. Chapter 2665. It was already 1 o'clock in the morning when Yu Xiaoyun finished the meeting. He hung up the remote conference call. He reached out and rubbed the bridge of his nose tiredly. There were red streaks in his beautiful eyes. Chen Shan followed a few people to organize the Hainan Airlines project information. This was the biggest project after the transformation. It was also the foundation of their future foothold. If they were still like before, swallowing all the dark enterprises, then of course, they would still be in a terrifying and unshakable position. But if he started to deal with the dark enterprises, then he would lose a lot of wealth. More importantly, their status in the underworld was more important. This kind of self-harming transformation was what many people wanted to do. But they didn't dare to do it. Once their status was shaken, it meant that there would be more assassinations, more attacks, and more enemies watching them. This was the time when they had the most weaknesses. They wouldn't kill you at this time. Then, when the transformation was successful, then Yu Xiaoyun would be an unshakable behemoth in the dark world. Because he would rationalize all his wealth openly, it would be difficult to touch him in the future. Chen Shan put a few sorted Hainan Airlines documents on Yu Xiaoyun's table. Yu Xiaoyun casually stretched out his finger, indicating that they could leave. Everyone left respectfully. Yu Xiaoyun put a few documents into the safe. Then, like all ordinary office workers, he finally got off work. He could rest. Yu Xiaoyun heaved a sigh of relief and casually took off his suit jacket, revealing the white shirt inside. Then, a man with a beautiful face and an unhurried elegance walked out of the study. When he returned to the room, the moonlight had already scattered all over the floor. Behind the screen on the big bed, Yu Xiaoyun took a look and saw that small figure curled up under the blanket, sleeping soundly. His pursed lips relaxed a little, and he couldn't help but curl his lips into a smile. Then, he turned around and went to take a shower. The man with a clean and fresh smell went to bed quietly. Naturally, he reached out his arm and pulled her into his embrace. The girl's warm and soft body was nestled in his embrace obediently. Yu Xiaoyun hadn't had a nightmare for a long time. It was as if all the darkness and loneliness, as well as the terrifying and cold world in the dream, had left him with one more person in his arms. He lowered his head and rubbed his chin against her soft and silky hair. The girl seemed to have sensed something. Her eyelashes trembled, but she didn't wake up. Instead, she naturally moved her body closer to him. Her hand casually rested on his shoulder, as if she wanted to hold on to something. Yu Xiaoyun didn't think too much about it. He reached out and gently held her fingers. Just as he was about to close his eyes, he saw something from the corner of his eye. The dim yellow bedside lamp, coupled with the moonlight, was too bright. The wound on her wrist was clearly visible. It was a bite mark. There were clear teeth marks that resembled self-mutilation. Yu Xiaoyun's pupils shrank and his breathing stopped. He stared at the teeth marks on her wrist. Then, she checked again and again to make sure that she had bitten herself. Because whether it was the bite marks or the location, they were all bitten by her. Yu Xiaoyun's originally gentle and affectionate expression was replaced by a dark and fierce anger. What was going on? His trembling body from anger seemed to have been discovered by the girl. She furrowed her brows and opened her eyes in a daze. Her eyes were misty. He wanted to ask her why she hurt herself, but the words were forcefully stuck in his throat. Only then did Yu Xiaoyun realize that her mind was too immature. Chapter 2666. If he really questioned her, she might not know how to answer. And besides the teeth marks? Did she have other wounds on her body? Yu Xiaoyun suddenly remembered that he saw her interacting with Mi Na earlier. Mi Na seemed to want to hold her hand, but she quickly dodged with vigilance in her eyes. She was like a small animal that had been hurt. He had been vigilant in his heart at that time. He had also deliberately checked the girl's body and did not find any external injuries. Except for the faint red marks on the back of her hand. Wei Bai looked at Yu Xiaoyun in confusion, as if she did not understand what was wrong with him. When she saw his gloomy face, her eyelashes trembled and she instinctively wanted to leave him. However, Yu Xiaoyun grabbed her wrist and flipped her over, supporting her ear with one hand. His black hair hung down, and his usually affectionate and beautiful eyes were now filled with a deep coldness. Like a lonely wolf, he removed his gentle and hypocritical mask, revealing a few traces of sharp viciousness. Wei Bai shrunk under his body and looked at him in confusion. The man's breath were unusually aggressive, especially his body temperature. It was extremely hot. It almost burned her. Wei Bai's ignorant and panicked eyes finally made the dangerous man on top of her a little more rational. Yu Xiaoyun took a deep breath and pressed her wrist to his lips. The force of his tongue licking was a little like biting. When his force came to her teeth marks, it even brought another kind of pain to the wound. Wei Bai's cheek had a red mark because of her deep sleep. At this moment, she was even more excited by his actions, and her face was flushed. She retracted her hand and tried to stop him. However, the piercing pain from her wrist made her fingertips tremble, but she could not break free. Behind her wrist, the man's eyes were dark and vicious. His low voice was like a warning, but it was filled with worry and gentleness. In the future, you are not allowed to bite yourself. Wei Bai's face was flushed. She looked at him with misty eyes with a puzzled expression. However, Yu Xiaoyun didn't allow her to escape. He said word by word, "It's wrong for you to bite yourself. You're not allowed to do that in the future." It was obvious that she had bitten herself. Yu Xiaoyun knew that there was probably something wrong with her emotions that caused her to have the tendency to self-harm. After all, in her previous information, there was a tendency to self-harm. But ever since she had been with him, he had never found any inclination in her, so he was relieved. Who would have thought that she would start to harm herself again? He had clearly started to hire a psychiatrist to treat him. Why was it getting worse instead of getting better? Yu Xiaoyun thought of the recent treatment plan. Was it too radical? But he had clearly crossed out all the plans that would excite her too much. What triggered her to have self-destructive tendencies again? Yu Xiaoyun felt a dull pain in his chest and he was irritated. But he couldn't bear to scare her. He didn't even dare to ask her why she started hurting herself. He was afraid that when she recalled the past, she would become even more isolated and miserable. Wei Bai couldn't snatch her hand back, and she didn't understand his words. She stared at him with her round eyes, which were like washed obsidian. Because of her anger, there was a lively clarity. Suddenly, she knocked her forehead against his chest. A thud came from Yu Xiaoyun's chest. He groaned. Wei Bai immediately didn't dare to move. Her furry head was buried in his chest, and her body was stiff like a frightened little animal. Chapter 2667. She was afraid that she would cause him problems. Yu Xiaoyun felt angry and uncomfortable, but his heart was warm. This messy intertwining of emotions made his expression complicated for a moment. He sighed and let go of her hand. Wei Bai immediately retracted her fingers and hid her hand. Yu Xiaoyun didn't let her go. Instead, he ran his fingers through her long hair, and the smooth hair slipped through his fingertips. His voice was hoarse and dangerous. "You're mine." This sentence was soft and paranoid. The man lost a layer of elegance and calmness, revealing a childish and domineering side. "You can't bite my person." Wei Wei Bai. Why did these words sound so difficult to understand? "You're mine. You can't bite my person." Did he mean that she couldn't bite him? Yu Xiaoyun's lips and teeth were close to her skin, and he finally emphasized each word. "If someone has to bite, it can only be me." Bai Weiwei stared at him with big, confused eyes, motionless. She seemed to be unable to understand his words, but also seemed to be struggling to think about what he meant. Yu Xiaoyun felt that his warning didn't seem to have any good effect. Although he didn't find any other wounds, Yu Xiaoyun was still very concerned about Wei Wei Bai's self-harm. Mi Na heard Wei Wei Bai's self-harm, but her face was calm. "Mr. Yu, you have to believe in my professionalism. Miss Bai should be at a critical moment. A little self-harm in exchange for her sobriety is worth it." Yu Xiaoyun was looking through Mi Na's treatment plan. His beautiful eyes were half closed. Even the shape of his eyes was so gentle, at this moment, they were as cold as ice. Mi Na was still confidently talking about the effect of the treatment plan. Suddenly, a cold and calm voice sounded. "You can leave now. I'll get someone to transfer the contract liquidated damages to you. Leave within a week." After speaking, Yu Xiaoyun slowly threw the treatment plan on the table. He crossed his hands on the table and looked up at Mi Na coldly. "I don't care if she's sober or not, but if she starts to self-harm, I won't allow it." Mina was a little anxious. She pinched her palm with her fingers and tried to argue. She was too severely injured, so she sealed herself off. "Don't you want her to fully recover?" Yu Xiaoyun's incomparably affectionate eyes were now calm and indifferent. "You've said too much nonsense." Mi Na could see that Yu Xiaoyun was serious. She could even see the dark and paranoid emotions in his eyes. Suddenly, Mina understood. Her lips trembled as she said, "Don't you want her to get better?" Yu Xiaoyun looked at her indifferently, but he did not refute. Mi Na's tone was a little bewildered. "You're sick too, Yu Xiaoyun. Your possessiveness is abnormal. If you really like her, shouldn't you help her get better?" Yu Xiaoyun said calmly, "You know that I'm indeed sick. In this day and age, people pay attention to matching social status. It's good that both of us are sick, so we can't dislike each other." This reason shocked Mina. "Then why did you hire me?" Yu Xiaoyun looked at her calmly and said indifferently, "You're wrong. I do want to cure Wei Wei, but you don't have the ability." Chapter 2668. Mina emphasized, "I have the ability." Yu Xiaoyun didn't listen to her and reached out to send her away. Mina didn't expect to lose so inexplicably this time. Even her suggestion and hypnosis hadn't penetrated Wei Wei Bai's mind yet. She was chased away by Yu Xiaoyun. Just because Wei Wei Bai bit her? With Wei Wei Bai's illness, it would be abnormal if she didn't harm herself. What did it have to do with her treatment? Moreover, her hypnosis didn't instruct her to harm herself at all. Suddenly, an idea flashed through Mina's mind. All kinds of almost emotionless graffiti seemed to be premeditated self-harm. There was also the feeling of disharmony that Bai Weiwei usually showed. It was all like pretending to be sick. Mina's breathing quickened. She looked at Yu Xiaoyun, whose eyes were incomparably cold, and didn't say anything. She just lowered her head, turned around, and left. She didn't immediately pack her luggage. Instead, she took advantage of the time when Yu Xiaoyun wasn't aware to find Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai was lying by the window looking at birds. The warm late summer sun fell on the girl's breathtakingly beautiful face. The light purple Chong Sam was like a delicate and noble flower. The young girl raised her head, and around her pure white neck hung a jade green peach. On the wrist that reached out to play with the birds in the birdcage on her head, there was also a priceless jade bracelet of the same color. Yu Xiaoyun treated her as his most precious antique doll. All the treasures in his collection were used to decorate her. And the girl was completely indifferent to these. Mina hid at the side and stared at her, trying to observe for evidence that she was pretending to be sick. But Wei Wei Bai just stared at the birds in a daze. After poking the birds with her fingers, She retracted them and didn't do anything else. If she was faking it, it was too similar. Mina thought of something and took out her pocket watch for hypnosis. She never used this usually. It was too obvious. She used words to hint at Wei Wei Bai. Mina silently walked behind Wei Wei Bai, her voice soft and gentle. Wei Wei, you're tired. It's time to sleep. A trace of confusion appeared in by Wei Wei's eyes. A pocket watch landed in front of her eyes. Mina stood beside her, her pocket watch shaking slowly. Tell me, are you not sick? Wei Wei Bai didn't say anything and just stared at the pocket watch. Mina patiently continued to hypnotize him. You're not sick. She was using an interrogative tone. As long as Wei Wei Bai was hypnotized, she would be able to get the truth out of her. Wei Wei Bai did not answer and continued to remain silent. Mina knew that she didn't have much time left, so she was a little anxious and kept repeating herself. You're not sick, you're not sick. Wei Wei Bai. She wasn't sick. Who would be willing to admit that they were? What was wrong with this girl's brain? Mina's fingers suddenly froze, and her pocket watch trembled. The girl that she hypnotized suddenly closed her eyes. Was she asleep? She pulled the chain of the pocket watch hard, wanting to wake her up, but she remembered that Yu Xiaoyun would be back soon. Mina could only stomp her feet. She had something more important to do. Hypnotizing Wei Wei Bai was secondary. She would think about it later. This time, she needed to stop the Hainan Airlines project and prevent Yu Xiaoyun from successfully transforming. This would be of great benefit to her family. When Yu Xiaoyun's project ran aground and failed, he would be hit hard. She would appear and let Yu Xiaoyun marry her, and then get him. This was the plan from the beginning. As for making Wei Wei Bai commit suicide, it was just a temporary idea. After all, Yu Xiaoyun would be her husband in the future. And if her husband had such a little lover by his side, how could she tolerate it? Transmigration system. Adonis, come here. Transmigration system. Adonis, come here. Chapter 2669. Mina turned around and left in a hurry, planning to do it tonight. After she left, Wei Wei Bai still maintained her sleeping posture. Not long after, a hand gently stroked her long hair. Yu Xiaoyun's pleasant voice sounded softly. Wei Wei, why are you sleeping here? You'll catch a cold. Wei Wei Bai's eyelashes trembled, and she opened her eyes in confusion, as if she didn't know why she fell asleep. When she saw Yu Xiaoyun, a hint of surprise flashed in her eyes. Then she reached out, hugged his neck, and snuggled into his arms. She whispered gently, Yu Xiaoyun, hug me. These words were too clear, and they were too in line with her current age. The delicate feeling of a young girl was undeniable. He had once thought that if Wei Wei Bai wasn't sick, she would probably look like this. But she was sick. Her mental age was many years younger. This wasn't something she would say. Thinking of the scene he saw in the surveillance camera just now, Yu Xiaoyun gently hugged her and didn't say anything. Hypnosis, suggestion, and implantation of consciousness. They were all key abilities to destroy or heal a person. Mina was indeed very capable. He saw her holding a pocket watch and hypnotizing Wei Wei Bai, saying that she wasn't sick. It was as if she was controlling the girl, making her into a seemingly normal puppet. This was a relatively powerful hypnosis skill, but this skill couldn't be maintained for long. And this wasn't a treatment, it was more like controlling someone and making that person into the ideal state of hypnosis. As long as the hypnosis was broken, it would lose its effect. Could it be that he wanted to drive her away? So Mina came to hypnotize Wei Wei Bai? Making her look normal meant that the treatment plan was good, so she could stay. Yu Xiaoyun's movements were extremely gentle as he stroked Wei Wei Bai's hair, but his eyes were sinister. No matter what Mina's purpose was, her hypnosis, suggestion, and manipulation of Wei Wei Bai had already crossed his bottom line. The girl didn't seem to notice that she was abnormal. She leaned her head comfortably on Yu Xiaoyun's shoulder, her breath gently blowing on the man's neck. The soft girl said sweetly, Yu Xiaoyun, I hate it when you have other women around you. Yu Xiaoyun stopped stroking her hair. Although he knew that she was being hypnotized, that was why she was so normal. But her words still made him a little stiff. He was like a little man who was suspected of cheating by his girlfriend. He explained in a low voice, That's the psychiatrist I found for you, not the woman around me. Wei Wei Bai pushed him away in a fit of pique. She jumped off the chair in a huff. Because she walked quickly, her fair calves were faintly discernible under the cheongsam. You're lying. You like that woman. Otherwise, why would she bother me every day? After saying that, she came to the screen. The young girl turned her head, crossed her arms in front of her chest, and said fiercely, "Remember this, you are mine, Yu Xiaoyun." Yu Xiaoyun stood by the window and looked at her in a daze. Looking at her angry appearance, she was charming and passionate. She was like a rose with thorns. The mist in her eyes disappeared without a trace, and only her lively anger and cuteness remained. She stomped her feet, and her beautiful purple cheongsam shook. "Do you understand?" Yu Xiaoyun was silent for a while, and couldn't help but smile. His thin lips were slightly pursed. "Yes, I am yours." Although he knew that it was the effect of hypnosis that made her temporarily better. In the past, he even worried that he just liked her closed-off appearance. Pure and childish, it never hurt him. Only then did he open his heart to like her and think that she was good. But when she angrily asked him to like her and belong to her with a coquettish face, the hole in his chest that had been there for many years was instantly filled. Every frown and smile was good. Being closed off and normal was beautiful. Yu Xiaoyun only felt that his heart was beating fast in his chest. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 65. Yu Xiaoyun suddenly felt that maybe he could change the psychiatrist. Let her really get better. If she was so cute when she got better, he could even overcome his twisted possessiveness. Let her be angry at him so normally. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the comma. Chapter 2670. The effect of the hypnosis was better. Wei Wei Bai still looked normal after dinner. Yu Xiaoyun felt that it was fresh, but he was more relieved. Because he was sure that his preferences for her did not change with her attitude. It was more like because she was Wei Wei Bai, so no matter what she looked like, as long as she was her, it was fine. Bai Weiwei held a bowl of sweet red bean soup and drank it. "I like sweet things, and I like to eat meat. I don't eat bean sprouts or tofu. Remember this." Yu Xiaoyun held a pen with his slender fingers and slowly wrote in beautiful handwriting on the booklet. "Okay, I'll remember it." Wei Wei Bai glanced at him with her beautiful eyes. Her red lips curled up as she muttered, "You too, you're not allowed to eat vegetables all the time. It's normal to eat more meat. People who are vegetarian are not in good health. I'm not like you who have a short life." Yu Xiaoyun's pen paused, as if he was helpless. He seemed to be hesitating whether to write this down as well. She had been a vegetarian for too long and couldn't smell meat. The reason why meat dishes could be served was because she couldn't eat vegetables. Wei Wei Bai knocked the spoon on the side of the bowl and raised her eyebrows. "I told you not to have a short life, but you're still frowning. Are you angry?" Yu Xiaoyun looked at the snow-white porcelain spoon on the girl's fingertips. Her pale pink nails were like thin cherry blossoms. When he first raised her, she was like an abandoned kitten. Her hair was messy, and she was thin and pale. She was so fragile that she could disappear at any time. Now, he could see the color on her face, lips and nails. It was all because of her delicate nature. Just like her temper. She ordered him around so delicately. He couldn't wait to kick his chest to make him listen to her. It was really cute. Yu Xiaoyun lowered his eyes unhurriedly. He couldn't help but bite his lower lip with his teeth to suppress the hot thoughts. The handwriting under the tip of his nose was also a little heavier. His eyes were dangerous, but he suppressed it. His tone was even gentler. "I'll try." These 3 words were especially heavy. After all, no one dared to ask him to change his habits. It was a habit that he did not change. Even if someone dared to challenge him, he would not listen. Just saying, "Try" was already extremely indulgent of her. Unfortunately, the delicate little girl in front of him was not satisfied. She glanced at him a few times, then turned sideways and lowered her head to drink the red bean soup, her lips curling up high. "You still want to try?" "Humph. Perfunctory means perfunctory." Yu Xiaoyun was even more helpless. He reached out and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He really indulged her temper. Her temper was too big. When he was too old, he would torment him. But at the same time, he felt an itch in his heart from her torment. He didn't feel angry at all. This emotional fluctuation, as well as this unfamiliar willingness to take a step back. This made Yu Xiaoyun feel a little strange, but he also enjoyed it. He didn't know how long this hypnosis effect would last. He looked at Wei Wei Bai, who was throwing a tantrum, and couldn't help but smile. She was so cute. Being autistic is cute. Being willful is cute. She was not normally cute, but normally she was still cute. Yu Xiaoyun's affectionate and gentle eyes were filled with thick joy. Bai Weiwei looked back and gazed into a pair of breathtaking eyes that made people sink into them. She was stunned. A thin blush suddenly appeared on her face, and then the blush ran all the way to the tip of her ears. She stopped breathing and immediately turned around. Then, she lowered her head and didn't say anything. Yu Xiaoyun still didn't understand. What's wrong? Wei Wei Bai was silent for a moment before she secretly looked at him. Like a peeping kitten, she carefully widened her eyes. In the future, she said softly, you're not allowed to look at other women like that. To read the full article at https://www.session.com to read on. com// for the convenience of your next reading, you can click on the button below to record this reading record. Chapter 2671. Yu Xiaoyun touched the corners of his eyes strangely. Is it wrong to look at others like this? Wei Wei Bai's eyelashes trembled and her face turned even redder. Her eyes were filled with a trace of anger. If you look at others like this, won't they fall in love with you? You're a male fox spirit. Yu Xiaoyun felt the corners of his eyes twitch. Male fox spirit. Wei Wei Bai said it out loud. She stomped her foot and said fiercely and coquettishly, "What kind of eyes are you looking at?" It's like you're seducing people. People would think that you're seducing them. If you look at anyone like that, they would think that you're in love with them. Yu Xiaoyun's long eyelashes drooped and his eyes sparkled. Oh, I'm looking at you like this. Am I seducing you or am I making you fall in love with me? Wei Wei Bai opened her mouth and couldn't say anything for a long time. In the end, she put down the bowl and stood up to say loudly, "I'm not eating, it's too sweet." The smile in Yu Xiaoyun's eyes deepened. He stretched out his long arm and grabbed the girl who was about to leave by the waist. He directly carried her to sit on his lap. Wei Wei Bai was shocked and her entire body was sitting on his firm thighs. "I'm seducing you." Wei Wei Bai stared at him blankly, as if she was seduced. Of course, she quickly lowered her head. She was just picky, but now she didn't. She seemed to have become a poor autistic girl again. She didn't dare to say anything. Yu Xiaoyun didn't let her go. He raised his head and his thin lips touched her cheek. "Why are you so smart?" His voice was very hoarse. "I'm indeed seducing you and making you fall in love with me." Wei Wei Bai's eyes widened. Her entire body was gently placed on the table by the man. His eyes were full of smiles as he leaned down. "So, are you in love with me?" Wei Wei Bai's entire body stiffened. Her delicate face was full of a bright red color and her lips had just opened. The man had already lowered his head. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 65. Everything was said without words. After eating supper, Wei Wei Bai had just finished brushing her teeth and was about to go to bed. She saw Yu Xiaoyun standing at the door wearing black satin home clothes and soft cloth shoes. The door was open, and Chen Shan was saying something with a serious face. Behind Chen Shan were several bodyguards. Half of Yu Xiaoyun's face was hidden in the shadows. His usually gentle eyes had a hint of murderous coldness. He turned his head and his eyes fell on the girl who had just stepped out of the bathroom. There was a hint of gentleness in his cold eyes. "You. Calm." Yu Xiaoyun directly. Bai Weiwei yawned and really wanted to continue sleeping like a retard. During this period of time, he ate, drank, and slept well. He didn't stay up late anymore. The system said, Auntie Mina cut off the electricity in half of this place. She even hacked into the system and tried her best to destroy the project data in the male protagonist's computer. If it was destroyed, it would be a heavy loss. System. Someone has already lured the people away from the study. They're opening the safe now. Bai Weiwei nodded, then went directly behind the screen, where the bed was. There was also a beautiful antique table in the room. To make it easier for you to read next time, you can click Save below to record this reading record. Chapter 2672. There was a small basket made of bamboo on the table. Wei Wei Bai took out a key from the basket. There was a jade pendant and a small tassel hanging from the key buckle. It was very beautiful. It was just that no one knew that this casually placed key was the key to the safe in Yu Xiaoyun's study where his most important secret was kept. She would know that the system said so. Of course, Yu Xiaoyun also said that he saw her playing with the jade pendant on the key and casually told her the use of the key. She didn't know if he really trusted her, this retard. Or was he sure that even if she knew, she wouldn't be able to take this key, open the safe, take the information, and escape? Wei Wei Bai's eyes became a little blank. She took the key and walked out step by step. Like a ghost, her eyes were a little dull. As if she was being controlled, she muttered softly. The information, give it to her personally, she muttered almost silently. She muttered to herself in a strange way. She went all the way to the study without any obstruction. The door was half open. Mina was lying in front of the safe seriously trying to figure out the password. Wei Wei Bai quietly walked to her side and listened to the system saying the location of the hidden surveillance camera. She naturally turned her back to the surveillance camera. Then she almost silently said to Mina, who noticed her arrival with a look of surprise, "By the time you get the information, Yu Xiaoyun will be here. Go away, I'll do it." Mina was shocked for a few seconds before she suddenly reacted. "You're not sick?" Not only was she not sick, but she was also planning to harm Yu Xiaoyun like her? Wei Wei Bai lowered her head and put the key in her hand into the keyhole of the safe. A sarcastic smile slowly appeared at the corner of her mouth. "Not only am I not sick, but I also know what you're thinking. Are you worthy of hypnotizing me?" The door of the safe opened, and the girl's voice was contained in her lips. Only Mina could hear it. Wei Wei Bai's silent mocking eyes were as sharp as knives. "Get the information and get lost. Yu Xiaoyun is mine." This sentence was cold and heavy. Mina's face contorted into a hideous expression. Under the guidance of the system, Wei Wei Bai accurately took out the project from Hainan Airlines. Then she handed it to Mina. Mina looked at the beautiful yet fragile girl in front of her. Her beautiful cherry-red lips started to move silently. His voice was so low that it was almost inaudible. But she still understood what he was saying. "Old woman, if you're so ugly, then don't have a crush on my man. Consider this information as charity. When you see me in the future, remember to lower your head and obediently stay at least 100 meters away." The girl's posture was slender and cold, vicious and arrogant, like a poisonous flower. His pale face was filled with a sinister and bewitching charm. The system asked, "Why are you provoking her like that?" Wei Wei Bai saw the information in her hand being forcefully snatched away by Mina. She smiled. "Find a scapegoat. Otherwise, how can I be a pitiful little white flower?" The side missions insisted that she be the main female lead. Even the move of betraying Yu Xiaoyun was thrown at him. But who said that she had to betray Yu Xiaoyun to personally hand the information to Mina? Couldn't it be that she was forced and manipulated? As expected, when Mina took the information, her heart relaxed, but a murderous intent was aroused by the girl's mocking gaze. Why? A little girl who pretended to be retarded. She played everyone in circles. Even the man she liked this scheming bitch. Mina saw Wei Wei Bai looking at her with a cold smile, as if she was looking at a dog. Sa. Download the at https://m. Sashu.com// the button at the bottom to record the reading record. Chapter 2673. She thought about how she wouldn't be able to see Yu Xiaoyun for a while after she left with the information. During this time, it was still this little B*TCH who was enjoying herself by Yu Xiaoyun's side. The hatred that had been hidden in Mina's heart for many years and the madness of not being able to get what she wanted all turned into a terrible impulse. She wanted to kill Wei Wei Bai. Anyway, there was still time. Everyone was attracted by the top hacker that she hired. Mina stuffed the information into her bag and smiled kindly. "I really have to thank Wei Wei for helping me get the information." Wei Wei Bai looked indifferent. With her back to the surveillance camera, she looked like she didn't speak from beginning to end. She looked a little confused and sluggish. Mina reached out and gently placed her fingers on her neck as if she was comforting her. "So you'd better die." The smile on Mina's face turned sinister. She put both hands on Wei Wei Bai's neck and was about to strangle her to death. There was a loud sound of a door being kicked open. Outside the door, Yu Xiaoyun came in like a violent wind and kicked Mina away. More than a dozen people rushed in from the door and rushed to restrain Mina. Yu Xiaoyun had already turned around and hugged Wei Wei Bai in his arms. His eyes were full of worry, and his fingers trembled as he touched her neck. He was afraid that something bad would happen to Mina. Wei Wei Bai's eyes were a little empty. She looked at Yu Xiaoyun blankly for a long time, as if she didn't know what was wrong with her. Yu Xiaoyun also saw that something was wrong with her. She had become autistic again. Previously, she looked like a normal person, but as the hypnosis effect weakened, she disappeared. The girl's face was as pale as paper, and her pair of ignorant eyes made Yu Xiaoyun's heart heavy and uncomfortable. He gently reached out and touched her hair. "It's okay, Wei Wei." Because he knew Mina's tricks. He also knew that she had hypnotized Wei Wei. He was afraid that this woman had used some vicious hypnosis on her. Only then did he allow Wei Wei Bai to take his keys out at night. He had been following her. When he was outside the door, he was ready to rush in and rescue her at any moment. But she was also afraid that Mina would not be able to get rid of all the hints she had given her. He knew that this hypnotic suggestion was extremely frightening. Some can lie low for years. As far as he knew, Mina's hints to her included self-harm so that she could become a normal person. Now, he knew about it again. It turned out that Mina had been hypnotizing her to become a normal person. It was for her to steal the information. Because only a normal person would have the intelligence to take the key, walk to the study, and open the safe. He was still worried at the door about what other hints were there other than the hint of stealing the data. She then heard Mina telling Wei Wei Bai to die. At that moment, his mind was a little muddled, and violent anger surged up. How dare this woman kill the person he liked in his territory? Yu Xiaoyun hugged Wei Wei Bai and rested his chin on her shoulder. His thin lips were close to her ear as he gently comforted her. But when he looked at Mina, who was in a sorry state, his eyes, which had once been so gentle and affectionate, were now filled with hatred, coldness and killing intent. When she was about to kill Wei Wei Bai, Yu Xiaoyun knew that there were no more hints. Because this meant that her use of Wei Wei Bai had come to an end. Mina was kicked until she vomited a few mouthfuls of blood and was tied up tightly. Yu Xiaoyun didn't want to scare Wei Wei Bai, so his voice was soft and gentle. "Take her out and wait for me to deal with it." After saying that, he was about to carry Wei Wei Bai out. Mina's sharp voice sounded. "She's not sick, she's lying. She even gave me the information. She wants to kill you, Yu Xiaoyun." Chapter 2674. Yu Xiaoyun's footsteps paused. It seemed that the woman's voice was too sharp. Wei Wei Bai's body trembled. She was a little scared. Yu Xiaoyun quickly reached out to touch her back and whispered, "It's okay now." Mina still wanted to shout something, but her mouth was already stuffed. Yu Xiaoyun carried Wei Wei Bai and left this troublesome place. The information was handed over by Wei Wei Bai. How could he not know? But this was obviously caused by vicious hypnosis. His face was full of anger. After hurriedly carrying the person in his arms back to the house, he put her on the bed. Then he carefully checked Wei Wei Bai's body again, afraid that there were any injuries that he didn't find. Wei Wei Bai was a little ticklish. She stared at him blankly and couldn't help but shrink back. Yu Xiaoyun's fingers paused, and his gloomy face slowly returned. There won't be a next time. This woman was invited back by him, and she almost died. Wei Wei Bai looked at him silently for a while. Suddenly, her mouth flattened, her eyes turned red, and tears fell down. Her body finally began to tremble. She seemed to have finally come back to her senses and knew what was wrong with her. She trembled like a pitiful little animal fleeing for its life, desperately squeezing into Yu Xiaoyun's arms. Wei Wei Bai clutched his clothes tightly with both hands and cried silently. "Yu Xiaoyun," she sobbed, clumsy and stuttering. I'm scared." All the doubts and the hidden scrutiny of Mina's words in his heart. They all disappeared because of her grievances. Yu Xiaoyun pursed his lips, and there was unbearable pity and heartache in his eyes. He kissed her tears and comforted her in a low voice. "Don't be afraid, I will never let you be hurt like this in the future." Wei Wei Bai cried. "I'm scared." Yu Xiaoyun was so guilty that he could barely raise his head. In the end he kissed her lips. Don't be afraid, I like you. So I will protect you, always protect you. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 70. Stupefied side quest. Once the betrayal plan was hatched, the vicious little white flower host would be able to walk down the path of a great female lead. In the end, not only did the host become more naive, but she also became more retarded. The system patted Feng Xing's shoulder calmly. You'll get used to it, hee hee. The host likes to be a little white flower. What can you do? From the very beginning, had the system never thought of letting the host be a by Aotion? Those super overlords who opened harems of 30 million every day, destroyed planets with a raise of their hands, and stepped on the universe as they walked. Who wouldn't be envious? However, his host loved to reap the benefits of a beauty that could topple empires. She would lie down and wait for favorable impression points to arrive. She liked to act pitiful and pretended to be a white lotus. She was full of schemes and was often accompanied by green tea. The system stared at it for a long time, then thought of those pieces that had been crushed into idiots. He suddenly felt that little white flower was actually very scary. After a long time, he would let his host wander around on her own. It was better for him to save up more money to buy rewards for his host. Perhaps he had suffered a huge blow to his side. He staggered to the side of the trash can and squatted down. The system thought that he had stopped. He yawned and went to bed. Wei Wei Bai was also coaxed to bed by Yu Xiaoyun. She reached out and grabbed his hand in a daze, and finally fell asleep from exhaustion. Yu Xiaoyun looked at her in silence for a long time before he got up and covered her with a blanket. Then he walked out, wanting to settle Me Na's matter overnight. Wei Wei Bai was light with nothing to do. She covered herself with a blanket and planned to continue eating and waiting for death. Then she heard the gloomy voice of the side mission. Yo, you're up. Wei Wei Bai, side mission. The career side mission has been fully activated. Please complete all the tasks in 3 months. It was simple, and there was nothing else. However, when Wei Wei Bai saw the so-called task list, her expression changed. Destroy the Sea Navigation Project to let Yu Xiaoyun know that she was not sick. Damn, this was asking for her life. Take away Yu Xiaoyun's power, and then humiliate him by saying that he was a dog of the Bai family. A dog for a while, a dog for life. Wei Wei Bai wanted to curse. You're the dog. You side mission dog. Let's die together. There was also something about whipping him, forcing him to be her slave, and other small tasks that she couldn't bear to look at. Wei Wei Bai expressed that this was a hellish task list. How long had the side mission been prepared? Wei Wei Bai. Fuck, little watch. Disfigurement. Wei Wei Bai. Fuck. I'll treat you to a meal. Little watch. You're welcome. Wei Wei Bai. Haha. Xiao Biao. To make you strive to improve, to make you stand at the top, and to let you crush your target, I'm also worried sick. When you treat us to a meal, just order more abalone featherwings and eye socket matsutake. Wei Wei Bai. I'll drink a few tons of dichlorvos to you. Transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. 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 Chapter 2675. Regarding the sudden appearance of a terrifying mission list. Wei Wei Bai was very conflicted and uncomfortable. The difficulty was so great that it was too scary. This matter troubled her for 3 minutes. Then she continued to cover herself with the blanket and closed her eyes to sleep. She could talk about the big things after she had eaten and slept well. As for the side quests, she could do as she pleased. She had been through so many worlds, and she was an old employee of Wei Wei Bai who was so greasy that she could squeeze oil out of it. She was extremely calm about any side quests that fell from the sky. This was the standard of maturity of a conqueror. She was mature. These words revealed the beautiful character of a dead pig that was not afraid of boiling water. After Yu Xiaoyun finished dealing with Me Na's matter, he went to wash his hands very calmly. There was a brass basin with a white towel beside it. His expression was calm as his slender and beautiful fingers slid through the water. He had just slapped that woman. He felt dirty. After Yu Xiaoyun washed his hands, the maid came forward to serve supper. It was almost dawn. He was used to eating something after dealing with things. It was still vegetarian porridge without any minced meat. It was tasteless. He was used to eating it, so he didn't feel much. She should still be sleeping. Yu Xiaoyun thought of Wei Wei Bai's sleeping appearance. She was not very well behaved, but she was still very heavy. Once she was really asleep, it would be difficult to wake her up. Yu Xiaoyun felt that this was the sleeping style of a child because there were no worries in her mind. After finishing the porridge, the taste was bland. When Yu Xiaoyun put down the bowl, he inexplicably thought of the various small requirements written in the book. One of them was for him not to be a vegetarian. He had been a vegetarian for some years. When he first arrived at the Bai family, Old Master Bai observed him for a long time. He was afraid that he would rebel and was a wolf cub. Yu Xiaoyun was indeed a wolf. He was wrapped in a wolf's ambition. He had a black heart and black lungs since he was young. His father could serve the Bai family for so many years and mix in this dirty water for so many years. He was not clean to begin with. He had inherited his father's observation skills since he was young. Except for the people he cared about, he had always been extremely cold. But he had a pair of very good eyes. He inherited his mother's gentle and affectionate eyes. Everyone seemed to be deeply in love with each other. Old Master Bai saw that he was young and his eyes were so gentle. This was the first time that Old Master Bai, who had always had sharp eyes, made a mistake. She felt that he was not a threat and that his personality should be soft. This was his first life and death trial in the Bai clan. As long as he did not pass the test of Old Master Bai, and let him think that he was in the slightest danger, he probably wouldn't have lived to this day. Yu Xiaoyun slowly got up and walked out of the punishment room. Behind her were servants and bodyguards. The love garden was very big, with pavilions and terraces, spacious and lonely. This was where Old Master Bai missed the person he loved. From Bai Yanlong, he really couldn't see the slightest bit of goodness in the woman that Old Master Bai loved. How could his daughter be so terrible? In that case, the dead old woman was probably not much better. However, she had given birth to Wei Wei Bai. From Wei Wei Bai, he could see that everything about Wei Wei Bai was good. The human heart was really biased. The first year he entered the Bai family, he started to eat vegetarian food. Just because he wanted to start playing the role of a weak, incompetent, kind and affectionate good child. When the rabbit he raised died, he cried. The magnolia flowers that he had raised in the garden for a long time withered, and he pretentiously learned how to bury the flowers in the dream of the red chamber. Later on, he started not to eat meat, but because he felt that all living things were bitter, he was merciful and refused to eat. He remembered the scene of the servants lining up and persuading him to eat meat one by one. The small him curled up his body, hugging his knees with his hands, and burying his head on his thighs. At https://www.session.com/quick to read the full article at https://www.session.com/quick to txt download at https://www.session.com quick to read on. Come. Chapter 2676. His voice was filled with rejection and sadness. His expression, however, was terrifyingly cold. Kindness could not be acted as a habit. He was still cold and vicious. Affection could not be faked. He was still cold and distant. Only the habit of being a vegetarian had fooled Old Master Bai. Even if he had the power to eat meat in the future and reveal his true colors, this habit was not easy to get rid of. However, there was no harm in trying it now. After all, being a vegetarian for a long time would indeed make one's body weaker. It might even shorten one's life. Thinking of the girl's willfulness and arrogance, he wanted him to change. Before Yu Xiaoyun entered the room, he whispered to the side, "From tomorrow onwards, add some meat to my menu." Change little by little. Compared to the habit of being a vegetarian, he wanted to make her happy more. The servants and bodyguards who followed beside him were a little surprised. Yu Xiaoyun had already walked into the room. The sky had just brightened. Wei Wei Bai was still sleeping. He quietly got on the bed and held her in his arms. He pretended that he had never left. The man smelled the soft fragrance of the girl in his arms and slowly closed his eyes. The blood in the middle of the night was appeased. Yu Xiaoyun fell into a peaceful sleep. Recently, he did not have nightmares, nor did he have dreams of holding power and controlling people's lives. Only the girl's fragrance accompanied him, and he slept peacefully, almost without dreams. During breakfast, Wei Weibai found that there was a little bit of minced meat in Yu Xiaoyun's porridge. She was a mentally disabled person, so even if she saw it, she pretended not to see it. After all, a mentally disabled person's observation skills were too good, so they were not mentally disabled. The side quest was calculating the time coldly at the side. 3 months. Each month counts as 30 days. A total of 90 days. You still have 89 days and 13 hours left. Then, it began to make a terrifying sound. Wei Weibai couldn't help but ask, "What's that sound?" The side quest said, "If you fail the side quest, won't you be disfigured? I'll sharpen the bone knife first." Bone knife. Even the bones had to be cut if one was disfigured? Wei Weibai's face turned pale. Then she thought for a moment and tried to negotiate. "If I succeed in the side quest, can I borrow your knife?" After all, with a slash, one's soul would also be disfigured. This proved that this knife was not ordinary. "Xiao Biao. Why do you want to borrow it? Do you have any enemies that you want to disfigure?" Wei Weibai said with a look of self-pity. "No, I'm not complaining that my face is not perfect enough. There's a fine line between disfigurement and plastic surgery. When the time comes, I'll just have to grind my face with a knife to remove all the imperfections on my face. I'll be the most beautiful woman in the world." Xiao Biao. There was too much information in this line, and it couldn't understand it. Wei Weibai held her face in her hands. He. Although I am very beautiful, there is no limit to being beautiful. We have to have some lofty goals, such as being the #1 beauty in the universe. Xiao Biao. What kind of noble pursuit was this? You might as well aim to be the #1 white flower in the universe. At the very least, this is a skill point. Every day, he would hold his face and ask for the prettiest girl. Don't you think it's too shabby to mention this kind of pursuit? The system ate the blueberry cake in the side fridge. As it ate, it reached out to pat Xiao Biao's shoulder and said earnestly, "You've just become a spirit, you'll get used to her after a while." Xiao Biao. What kind of shameless host did it end up with? The system opened the fridge. "How about I treat you to strawberry pudding?" Xiao Biao. "That's my fridge." The system, "We're family, don't be so polite." Xiao Biao. What kind of shameless system did it end up with? Although the task list was very stressful, Wei Weibai was still leisurely. Yu Xiaoyun couldn't bear to see her leisurely and began to take her out for a walk. When there was a big meeting, she quietly played with jigsaw puzzles. When there was a project, she accompanied Yu Xiaoyun, eating and watching TV. After a long time, everyone knew that the girl who followed Yu Xiaoyun was gentle and weak. She wore a cheongsam and was unusually quiet and beautiful. She was Yu Xiaoyun's woman. Wei Weibai did not refute. Yu Xiaoyun did not refute and allowed this kind of thing to spread. The project progressed quickly, and only the last contract was left to be signed. The contract would be signed in about a week when the person in charge over there came over. Then, their transformation would be completely successful. After Yu Xiaoyun finished the remote meeting, he threw away his headphones and looked back. He saw Wei Weibai lying on the table, sleeping quietly. The girl's hair was as black as ink and her eyelashes were thick and long. Her skin was as white as clouds and was unusually clean and beautiful. Yu Xiaoyun looked at her for a while. That pair of gentle eyes with deep affection seemed to fill the entire sky. He kissed her hair gently. The man's voice was low and gentle. "Good night, Wei Wei. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the Chapter 2677. Yu Xiaoyun was concerned about Wei Weibai's psychological problems. To invite a famous psychiatrist in M country, he personally traveled to M country. Wei Weibai did not follow him. Yu Xiaoyun's recent maritime project had caused a lot of commotion. Everyone's eyes were on him. If he went abroad now, he would become a target if he brought Wei Weibai with him. He refused to take her on a risky trip, so he could only go personally. If everything went smoothly, he would be back in 3 days. Before Yu Xiaoyun left, he personally made a jade qipao for Wei Weibai. It had beautiful light orange tassels and a thin, aqua-colored, fan-shaped jade pendant. The jade pendant was engraved with the word, Yun. Wei Wei Bai thought that this thing was very fun. She twirled the tassels with her fingers with a serious expression. Yu Xiaoyun lowered his head and kissed her cheek. He whispered, "Wait for me to come back." Then he turned around and was about to leave. A pair of hands had already hugged his waist from behind. The girl's warmth and softness clung to his strong back. She was silent, as if she wanted him to stay. Yu Xiaoyun's body was stiff for a moment, but the expression on his face was gentle and pleasant. He did not move and let her hug him. The girl was very patient and kept hugging him without letting go. Yu Xiaoyun also patiently let her hug him. Finally, she loosened her arms and left his body, as if she felt that she was being willful. Yu Xiaoyun suddenly turned around, reached out and grabbed her arm. He pulled her into his arms and lowered his head to kiss her. Yu Xiaoyun let go of her and let her sit on the chair obediently. Then, he bent down and pinned the qipao to the second button of her qipao. The beautiful fan-shaped jade pendant and tassels hung on the silk material. The man's breath was a little messy, but his tone was so gentle that it made people's scalps tingle. There are red beans in the tassels. Although I know you don't understand, I still want you to know from time to time. This is also my intention. Red beans. Yearning. He knew it himself, but he was afraid that she did not understand, so he pinned it to her lapel. As expected, Wei Wei Bai opened a pair of watery round eyes and looked at him innocently and blankly. Yu Xiaoyun smiled helplessly. I'll teach you next time. Her dependence on him was probably just a habit. It had nothing to do with love and lovesickness. Yu Xiaoyun got up and turned to leave. When he walked out of the door, he couldn't help but look back, only to see that the girl's fingers were already touching the tassel on her chest. He also took out a few small red beans strung in the tassel. She touched red bean with her fingertips, her clear and focused eyes staring at him. The contours of her beautiful body, her ink-black hair that fell behind her, and her shadow that was elongated by the light. Everything felt as beautiful as a dream. Yu Xiaoyun was in a trance for a moment. It was as if she was not sick and understood the meaning of red bean. That was why she used such a loving and beautiful gaze to obediently send him off. This thought flashed through his mind, and he found it funny. Perhaps it was because he was too eager to see her return to normal that he started hallucinating. After Yu Xiaoyun left, Wei Wei Bai took off the red bean and threw it on the table one by one to play with it. While crushing the hard red bean, she said to the system, "Seize power first, then lock him up. Then, finish the side main mission within 3 months and hang yourself to leave." With Yu Xiaoyun's personality, he was a master of forbearance. She could do her best to seize his temporary power, but as long as she didn't kill him, he would definitely be able to make a comeback. When that time came, she would end up like Bai Yanlan, dead beyond dead. Wei Wei Bai had also thought it through. In any case, she would seize Yu Xiaoyun's temporary power within 3 months. She didn't have to accept all of his power and empire. This could be done. Is at https://www.seshu.com. Chapter 2678. Then, before the rest of the people found out, she would complete the side quest. After 3 months, he would be able to contact the rest of the people to turn the tables. It didn't matter if her mission was completed. Wei Wei Bai had calculated the mission rehearsal countless times. She found that this was the best and most dangerous way. The side quest wouldn't be over until it forced her into a dead end. She was too beautiful. Therefore, the side quest had been jealous of her for a long time. It finally found an opportunity to ruin her face, so it used the side quest to do such a vicious thing. This thought made her feel deeply depressed. The system. The host's narcissism had risen to another level. The side quest also heard. She only had a mouth, 2 eyes and a nose. What was there to be jealous of? What was there to be jealous of? The psychiatrist that Yu Xiaoyun invited had a strange temper. Even though he was invited, he wasn't casual because the other party still had an academic conference to attend. Yu Xiaoyun could have waited. But for 3 days, every night was torturous. He had nightmares when he slept. When he woke up and faced the cold and empty room, he felt that it was better to have nightmares. He felt that he was being tortured by lovesickness. When he called back, although the servant picked up, Wei Wei Bai didn't pick up. She seemed to have fallen in love with a little game. Yu Xiaoyun asked, "What game?" The servant replied, "She's counting the tassels you made for her, the jade pendant. He even made a bracelet for her. She took it out to play with." Yu Xiaoyun wondered if she missed him. That was why she played with the things he gave her repeatedly. Yu Xiaoyun felt warm in his heart, and the nightmares weren't so uncomfortable anymore. So once he confirmed that the psychiatrist would come, he took the plane back alone. Just as he got off the plane, a call came in hurriedly. Yu Xiaoyun didn't think much about it and picked up the call. Something had happened to Chen Shan. No, to be precise, something had happened to the elites of the upper class. During the upper class meeting, the conference room suddenly exploded. Everyone was sent to the hospital. Chen Shan was also admitted to the hospital. Fortunately, no one died. Yu Xiaoyun frowned, and a trace of solemnity appeared on his face. He called the hospital, but found that the medical staff at the hospital refused to answer his questions. They only kept saying that the patient's information needed to be kept confidential. Yu Xiaoyun's heart skipped a beat. He felt that something was wrong. Moreover, he knew that the meeting was about the last contract for the Hainan Airlines project. It was a remote meeting. It was a done deal. That was why he didn't continue to follow up. He let Chen Shan take full responsibility. The people who signed the contract must have seen the explosion in the meeting room through the video. If it wasn't handled properly, the time of the explosion would definitely cause the project to stop. But it was not the most serious. What was even more serious was that he couldn't even contact his trusted aides. All kinds of terrifying guesses had already flashed through Yu Xiaoyun's mind. Pursing his lips tightly, he suddenly thought of something and immediately called back. However, the servant did not take it. She clearly knew that the best choice was to immediately rush to the hospital with her bodyguards. But at this moment, Yu Xiaoyun's mind went blank. "Where's Wei Wei?" Yu Xiaoyun got into the car and shouted to the driver, "Go home immediately." He sent half of his bodyguards to the hospital while he rushed home immediately. He had 10,000 ways to deal with the crisis of power being seized. However, there was one price that he could not afford to pay. That was Wei Wei Bai's safety. Her mind was so weak that she would not be able to protect herself at all. If she fell into the hands of his enemies, the consequences would be unimaginable. Yu Xiaoyun's fingers gripped the seat of the car tightly, the veins on the back of his hands bulging. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.